The Secret of Chimneys by Agatha Christie. Read by Nigel Anthony. Gentleman Joe! Why, if it isn't old Jimmy McGrath. Castle Select Tour, represented by 7 depressed-looking females and 3 perspiring males, looked on with considerable interest. Evidently there Mr. Cade had met an old friend. They all admired Mr. Cade so much. His tall, lean figure, his sun-tanned face, his light-hearted manner. But this friend of his was a peculiar-looking man. About the same height as Mr. Cade, but not nearly so good-looking. The sort of man one read about in books, who probably kept a saloon. Interesting, though. After all, that was what one came abroad for, to see the peculiar things one read about in books. But up to now they had been rather bored with Bulawayo. Cade and his friend, meanwhile, had stepped a little apart. "What the hell are you doing with this pack of females?" demanded McGrath. "Starting a harem?" "Not with this lot," Anthony grinned. "No, this is a Castle Select Tour. I'm the local castle." "What the hell made you take on a job like that?" "A regrettable necessity for cash." "So, when can we have a yarn together?" Anthony sighed. "I've got to take these cackling hens to see Rhodes' grave." "Just the stuff," said Jimmy approvingly. "They'll come back bumped black and blue with the ruts in the road and clamouring for bed. Then you and I will exchange news." "Right you are, Jimmy." Anthony rejoined his flock of sheep. "Was that an old friend of yours, Mr. Cade?" said Miss Taylor, the youngest and most skittish of the party. "It was, Miss Taylor." "Why does he call you Joe?" "Because it isn't my name." "And why Gentleman Joe?" "Same kind of reason." "Oh, Mr. Cade, you shouldn't say that," Miss Taylor protested. "Is it a long time since you've seen your friend?" 7 years. The first time I saw Jimmy, he was all trussed up ready for the cooking pot. Some of the tribes in the interior are cannibals, you know. We got there just in time." "And what happened?" "Oh, we potted some of the beggars, and the rest took to their heels." "What an adventurous life you must have led, Mr. Cade." "Oh, no. Very peaceful, I assure you." "And now," Anthony said briskly, "time for morning tea. This way. There's an excellent cafe in the next street." It was 10 o'clock that night when Anthony Cade walked into the small room where Jimmy McGrath was busy manipulating various bottles. "Make it strong, James," he said. "I need it." "I should think you did. I wouldn't take on your job for anything." "Show me another, and I'd jump out of it fast enough." McGrath tossed back his drink with a practised hand. "You in earnest about that, old son?" "About what?" "Chucking this job if you could get another." "Why, have you got one going begging? Why don't you grab it yourself?" "I have grabbed it, but I don't much fancy it." Anthony became suspicious. "Why? What's wrong with it?" "Nothing. It's a perfectly good job." "Not in South America, by any chance? There's a very tidy little revolution coming off in one of those little republics soon." McGrath grinned. "You always were keen on revolutions. Anything to be mixed up in a really good row." "Well, I can be jolly useful in a revolution. It's better than making an honest living any day." "As it happens, my son, this job isn't in South America." McGrath grinned again. "It's in England." "England? Return of hero to his native land after many long years. They can't dun you for bills after 7 years, can they, Jimmy?" "I don't think so." "Well, are you on for hearing more about it?" "I'm on all right." "But why aren't you taking it on yourself?" "Because I'm after gold in the interior." "Oh, Jimmy, you've been after gold ever since I knew you. It's your weak spot. And in the end I'll strike it, you'll see. Now, I'll tell you the story. Know anything about Herzoslovakia? Anthony looked up sharply. Herzoslovakia? Yes. There was a pause before Anthony said slowly, one of the Balkan states. Capital, Bucharest. Population, chiefly brigands. Hobby, having revolutions. Last king, Nicholas IV, assassinated about 7 years ago. Since then, it's been a republic. And ever heard of Count Stilptich, who was the Prime Minister? Anthony nodded. Oh, now you're talking. Depending on which newspaper you take, the greatest statesman of modern times, or the biggest villain unhung. The perfect king of intrigue. Well, what about him? I thought he was dead. So he is, Jimmy agreed. He died 2 months ago in Paris. But what I'm telling you about happened 4 years ago. I was in Paris then, and I was walking along one night when I saw half a dozen French toughs beating up an old gentleman. So I promptly butted in, proceeded to beat up the toughs, and they melted like snow. Good for you. Well, the old boy was no end grateful. He'd had a couple, but was sober enough to get my address, and he came and thanked me next day. It was then I found out it was Stilptich I'd rescued. Anthony nodded. Yes, he went to Paris after the assassination of King Nicholas. Nicholas was the one who had a funny taste in wives, wasn't he? Jimmy said suddenly. Yes, and it did for him, poor beggar. She was some little gutter-snipe of a French musical artist. But Nicholas had a frightful crush on her, married her in the cathedral at Bucharest, and she was crowned as Queen Viraga. But the populace are very reactionary in Herzoslovakia. They like their queens to be the genuine article, so there were mutterings and discontent. And finally the uprising which stormed the palace and murdered the king and queen. It's been a republic ever since, although they've assassinated a president or two just to keep their hand in. But revenons à nos moutons. Stilptich was hailing you as a preserver? Yes. Well, I came back to Africa and never thought of it again. Until 2 weeks ago, I got an odd-looking parcel, which had been following me all over the place. I'd seen in a paper that Stilptich had recently died, and, well, this parcel contained his memoirs, or whatever you call the things. There was a note to the effect that if I delivered the manuscript at a certain firm of publishers in London, on or before October 13th, they were instructed to hand me £1,000. Anthony whistled. Did you say 1,000? I did, my son, and I had no time to lose, although I had set my heart on this trip to the interior. I shan't get such a good chance again. Oh, Jimmy, you're incurable. £1,000 in the hand is worth a lot of mythical gold. And supposing it's all a hoax. Anyway, here I am, passage booked, and on the way to Cape Town when you blow along. Anthony lit a cigarette. I begin to perceive your drift, James. You go gold hunting, as planned, and I collect the 1,000 for you. How much do I get? A quarter? Done. It's a deal? It's a deal. I'm on. And confusion to Castle Select Tours. They drank a toast, solemnly. So, said Anthony, what boat were you going on? Granarth Castle. If the passage is booked in your name, then I suppose I'd better travel as James McGrath. Frowning, Anthony rose and paced the room. Jimmy, Stilptich died in Paris. What's the point of sending a manuscript from there to London via Africa? Why not post it? I don't know. Have you read the manuscript at all? Good Lord, no. What for? Anthony smiled. Oh, I just wondered. A lot of trouble has been caused by memoirs, you know. Indiscreet revelations, that sort of thing. What sort of man was Stilptich? Difficult to tell. He was distinctly canned that first night, but the next day he was a high-toned old boy with the most beautiful manners. And he didn't say anything interesting when he was drunk? Jimmy wrinkled his brow. He did say he knew where the Koh-i-Noor was. Well, we all know that, said Anthony. In the tower. behind thick plate glass, with a lot of gentlemen in fancy dress standing round. Did he say anything else? He said the gang that were after him were King Victor's people. What? Anthony wheeled round suddenly. A grin widened on McGrath's face. You're just a mite excited, aren't you? Who's King Victor? Another Balkan monarch? No, said Anthony slowly. He isn't that kind of a king. He's a crook, Jimmy. The most daring jewel thief in the world. King Victor was his nickname in Paris. They caught him there and put him away for 7 years on a minor charge, since they couldn't prove the more important things against him. He'll be out soon. He may even be out already. Jimmy frowned. Do you think Count Stilptich had anything to do with putting him away? So the gang went for him out of revenge? I don't know. King Victor never stole the crown jewels of Herzoslovakia, as far as I've heard. Anthony paused. But the whole thing does seem rather suggestive, doesn't it? The death of Stilptich, the memoirs, and there have been rumours in the papers lately of a royalist restoration in Herzoslovakia, and a further rumour that they found oil. I have a feeling people are ready to be interested in that unimportant little country. What sort of people? Yellow-faced financiers in city offices. What are you driving at? Anthony shrugged. Oh, just trying to make an easy job difficult, that's all. There can't be any difficulty in handing over a manuscript at a publisher's office. No, I don't suppose there can be, Anthony said somewhat regretfully. But I shall tell you, James, where I'll go with my £250. South America? No, my lad. Herzoslovakia. I shall stand in with the Republic, I think. Very probably I shall end up as president. Why not be king whilst you're about it? No, Jimmy, kings are for life. Presidents only take on the job for 4 years or so. The average for kings is even less, I'd say, interpolated Jimmy. Anthony eyed him thoughtfully. You know, James, the more I think of it, the more pleased I am with this idea of yours. I should never have thought of Herzoslovakia if you hadn't mentioned it. I shall spend 1 day in London collecting the booty, and then away by the Balkan Express. But you won't get away quite as easily as that. I didn't mention it before, but I do have another little commission for you as it happens. Anthony looked at him severely. I knew it. This is where the catch comes in. Not a bit. It's something to help a lady. James, I refuse to be mixed up in your beastly love affairs. It's not a love affair. I've never seen the woman. I'll tell you the story. It was when I was in Uganda. There was a man there whose life I had saved. Jimmy, you should write a book entitled Lives I Have Saved. This is the second this evening. Oh, I only pulled him out of the river. Seems he couldn't swim. Oddly enough, he was a Herzoslovakian too, though we always called him Dutch Pedro. Anthony nodded. Any name's good enough for a foreigner, I suppose. Go on. Well, the fellow was grateful, then 6 months later he died of fever. Just as he was pegging out, he beckoned me, whispered something about a secret, a gold mine, and shoved an oilskin packet into my hand. Well, I must confess I was curious, and I opened the packet. I was never so disgusted in my life. It may have been a gold mine to him, the dirty dog. But do you know what it was? A woman's letters. An Englishwoman at that. And the skunk had been blackmailing her. Anthony shrugged. He meant well. You'd saved his life. But what the hell was I to do with them? Burn them, I thought. Then it occurred to me that there's that poor dame living in dread lest he should turn up again one day. Oh, Jimmy, you're a real knight-errant. Anthony clapped his friend on the back. The backwoods of Canada should be proud of you. Unfortunately, she'd put no address on most of the letters, except one. Just the one word. Chimneys. Chimneys? Anthony started. You know it? It's one of the stately homes of England, where kings go for weekends and diplomats foregather and diplome. Well, she may have been staying there. McGrath crossed to a drawer and took out a bundle of letters. Here, You better have a look at them. The poor little devil, she was scared stiff. You're very concerned about this lady, James. Well, it's such a pretty name. Virginia Revel. Quite so, my dear fellow, quite so. Lord Caterham had used the same words 3 times already, in the hope they would permit him to escape. He disliked very much being forced to stand on the steps of his exclusive London club and listen to the interminable eloquence of the Honourable George Lomax. What the 9th Marquis of Caterham also objected to was the assumption that Chimneys was a national possession, rather than a private country house. His late brother Henry, the former Secretary of State for Foreign Affairs, had done this kind of thing magnificently, but nothing bored the present Lord Caterham more than politics. "So you see the point, Caterham," Lomax was saying. "The position is one of the utmost delicacy. One slip over this Herzoslovakian business and we're done. It is most important that the oil concession should be granted to a British company." Of course. Lord Caterham longingly eyed a taxi that was crawling past, but Lomax now had a firm grip of his lapel. "Prince Michael Abolovitch arrives at the end of the week, and the whole thing can be carried through at Chimneys under the guise of a shooting party." "But I was thinking of going abroad this week." "Nonsense. No one goes abroad in October. And I put it to you, in a moment of national crisis—" Lord Caterham wriggled uneasily. He knew Lomax was quite capable of going on for 20 minutes. "All right," he said hastily. "I'll do it. You arrange the whole thing." "My dear fellow, there's nothing to arrange. Chimneys is ideally situated. I shall be 7 miles away at Wyvern Abbey. It wouldn't do for me actually to be a member of the house party." "No, of course not," agreed Lord Caterham, who had no idea why it would not do, and was not interested to learn. "Perhaps you wouldn't mind having Bill Eversley, though. He'd be useful to run messages." "Delighted," said Lord Caterham, with a shade more animation. "So, the Prince, then, his suite, Bill Eversley, Herman Isaacstein—" "Who?" "Herman Isaacstein, the representative of the British Syndicate." "What curious names these people have." "And there ought to be 1 or 2 outsiders, young people, just to give the thing a bona fide appearance. Lady Eileen could see to that." "Yes, I'm sure Bundle would—" "I wonder now—" Lomax seemed struck by an idea. "You remember the matter I was speaking about earlier?" He lowered his voice. "Count Stilptitch's memoirs." "Yes, I think you're wrong about that. People like scandal, damn it. But their publication at this juncture might ruin everything. The Herzoslovakian people wish to restore the monarchy, and are prepared to offer the crown to Prince Michael, who has the support of His Majesty's government." "And who's prepared to grant concessions to Mr. Ike Hermanstein and Co. in return for the loan of $1 million or so to set him on the throne." Caterham, discretion, I beg of you," implored Lomax in an agonised whisper. But Lord Caterham continued with some relish. "The point being that some of Stilptitch's reminiscences may upset the apple cart. Tyranny and misbehaviour of the Abolovitch family generally, that kind of thing, eh?" Lomax nodded. "But worse still," he breathed, "suppose some reference should be made to that unfortunate disappearance." Lord Caterham stared at him. "What disappearance?" "You must have heard of it. It happened at Chimneys. It almost ruined your brother's career." "So who or what disappeared?" Lomax put his mouth to Lord Caterham's ear. The latter withdrew it hastily. "For God's sake, don't hiss." "But you heard what I said." "Yes. Very curious. And it was never recovered?" "Never. Of course, no hint of the loss could be allowed to leak out. But Stilptitch was there at the time, and he knew something. Suppose that in sheer malice he set the whole thing down for the world to read. Think of the scandal. Everyone would say, why was it hushed up?" "Yes, of course they would," said Lord Caterham with enjoyment. "And if Stilptitch didn't mean mischief, Why did he send the memoirs to London in this roundabout way? Lomax's voice had risen. We found out that they were sent to a man called McGrath, a Canadian who's due to arrive in London any time now. And what are you going to do about it? We shall beg him to defer publication. And it occurs to me it might be a good thing to ask him down to Chimneys as well. He'd be naturally flattered to meet Prince Michael. It might be easier to handle him. Well, I'm not going to do it, said Lord Caterham hastily. I don't get on with Canadians, never did. Somebody else has to tackle him. It has occurred to me that a woman might be very useful here. A young woman of charm, beauty, intelligence. Told enough, but not too much. She could put the position to him delicately and with tact. Not bundled in. She'd be no use at all. She's a red-hot socialist. No, I wasn't thinking of Lady Eileen. Your daughter is charming, Caterham, but quite a child. We need someone with savoir-faire, poise, knowledge of the world. My cousin, Virginia. Mrs. Revel? Lord Caterham brightened. The most charming woman in London. And she is up on Herzoslovakian affairs. Her husband was at the embassy there, you remember. Yeah. Very good suggestion, Lomax. Lord Caterham began to feel he might possibly enjoy the party after all. A most delightful creature. Lomax relaxed his hold on Lord Caterham's lapel. That's settled, then. At 2 o'clock that same afternoon, Anthony Cade, travelling under the name of Jimmy McGrath, stepped out of the boat train at Waterloo, hailed a taxi, and ordered the driver to proceed to the Blitz Hotel. It was 14 years since he'd been in London. He'd been just 18 when he left, and he'd been a socialist then, and worn a flowing red tie. When he arrived at the hotel, he booked a room, and then went for a short stroll along the embankment. It was pleasant to be back again, although everything was changed, of course. As he retraced his steps back to the Blitz, a man jostled against him, a man of the working classes, short, thick-set, and with something foreign in his appearance. He muttered an apology, but his eyes scanned Anthony's face narrowly. Anthony went on into the hotel, wondering just what had inspired that searching glance. Nothing, probably. The deep tan of his face was somewhat unusual amongst these pallid Londoners. He went up to his room, and some time later the telephone beside the bed rang. It was the desk clerk. "Mr. McGrath, a gentleman to see you," he said. "To see me?" "Yes, sir. I will send up his card." In a few minutes a small page boy appeared bearing a card upon a salver. The name engraved upon it was Baron Lorapretziel. "Show the gentleman up." "Very good, sir." Baron Lorapretziel was a big man with a fan-like black beard and a high, bald forehead. He brought his heels together with a click and bowed. "Mr. McGrath, I represent in London the Loyalist party of Herzoslovakia." "And admirably too, I'm sure," murmured Anthony. The Baron bowed again.
"You are too kind. Let us now to business come."
The Baron fixed Anthony with a stern eye.
"You have with you the memoirs of the late Count Stilptich. You come here to trouble make. They will cause scandals."
"Most memoirs do," said Anthony.
"Of many secrets he the knowledge had. Should he reveal them, Europe into war plunged maybe."
Come. Can't be as bad as all that. What exactly are you afraid of?"
"Until I have the memoirs read, I do not know. But there is sure to be something. The apple cart upset will be. So, let us to business come. £1,000 you are to have, it is not. I offer you 1,500.
Anthony shook his head ruefully. "Can't be done, I'm afraid."
2,000.
"You tempt me, Baron, you tempt me, but—"
"Your own price name, then."
"I'm afraid you don't understand. I've undertaken a job, and I've got to carry it through. I can't allow myself to be bought off. It isn't done."
"I see. For the English honour I much respect have. We must therefore another way try."
The Baron clicked his heels bowed, and marched out of the room. Mused Anthony. Was that a threat from old Lollipop, or whatever his name was? I wonder. He was undecided on his next course of action. Today was October the 5th, and the day for delivering the manuscript was over a week ahead. He had no intention of handing it over before the last moment. Truth to tell, he was by now anxious to read these memoirs to see what all the fuss was about. There was the other job, too. Anthony picked up the telephone book and looked up the name Revel. There were 6. However, there was absolutely no reason to suppose that the lady lived in London at all. I'll leave it for the moment, he thought. Something usually turns up. And such is the luck of the Anthony Cades of this world that he found what he was after not half an hour later, when he was turning over the pages of an illustrated magazine. There were photographs of some tableau organised by the Duchess of Perth. Below a woman in Eastern dress was the inscription, "The Honourable Mrs. Timothy Revel as Cleopatra." Before her marriage, Mrs. Revel was the Honourable Virginia Cawthron, daughter of Lord Edgbaston. Anthony tore out the page and folded it, then took the packet of letters out of his suitcase. He slipped the folded page under the string that held them together. There was a sudden sound behind him, and he wheeled round. A man stood in the doorway, a sinister-looking figure with a squat, brutal head. "Who let you up?" Anthony said. "I pass where I please." The stranger's voice was guttural and foreign. "Well, get out. Do you hear?" Anthony said coldly. "When you have given me the memoirs of Count Stilptich." The man took a step nearer and drew from his pocket a sheet of paper, which he threw on the table. "Look," he said. "Look and tremble, Englishman." Anthony looked, as commanded, though without trembling. On the paper was the crude design of a human hand, in red. "It's Cubist. Sunset at the North Pole." "Dog!" snarled his visitor. "It is the sign of the comrades of the Red Hand. I am a comrade." "You don't say," said Anthony, interested. "Paid slave of an effete monarchy." The man grated angrily. "Hand over the memoirs, or I shoot." But as he drew a revolver from his pocket, Anthony sprang. He knocked the gun from the man's hand, then with one mighty kick sent him flying into the corridor. The doughty comrade had had enough, and he fled down the passage. So much for the Red Hand, Anthony thought. So, I've already fallen foul of both the Loyalist and the revolutionary parties. This isn't going to be quite such a soft job after all. It was now nearly 9 o'clock, and Anthony decided to dine in his room. Whilst he was waiting for his meal to arrive, he got out the manuscript and put it on the table with the letters. There was a knock at the door, and the waiter entered with a small table and the accessories of the meal. He was a tall man, with a clean-shaven, mobile face. Anthony strolled over to the mantelpiece. "What's your name?" "Giuseppe, monsieur." "Italian, eh?" "Yes, monsieur." As he stood with his back to the room, facing the mirror, Anthony noticed a curious thing. The waiter's eyes were glued on the manuscript parcel. "Dash it all, no," Anthony said to himself. "I'm fancying things. Everyone can't be after the blasted manuscript." Dinner concluded, Anthony applied himself to the memoirs. But owing to the illegibility of the late Count's crabbed handwriting, the business was a slow one. After the 4th chapter he gave up. So far he'd found the memoirs insufferably dull, with no hint of any scandal. He gathered up the letters, together with the wrapping of the manuscript, and locked them in his suitcase. Then he locked the door, undressed, and got into bed. He had one more shot at the Count's memoirs, but felt his eyelids drooping, and, stuffing the manuscript under his pillow, he switched out the light. It must have been 4 hours later that he awoke with a start. He could hear a stealthy rustle. He lay quite still, then with a sudden spring jumped out of bed, switching on the light as he did so. The waiter, Giuseppe, was kneeling by the suitcase. In his hand gleamed a long, thin knife. He hurled himself upon Anthony. Next minute the two men were rolling on the floor, locked together. Slowly Anthony bent Giuseppe's right arm back until there was a sharp tinkle and the knife fell on the floor. At the same time the Italian twisted from Anthony's grasp and made for the window. He sprang out onto the balcony, leapt over to the adjoining balcony and disappeared through a window. Anthony knew it was no use to pursue him. Instead he walked to the bed, thrusting his hand beneath the pillow and drawing out the memoirs. Then he crossed to the suitcase and swore softly. The letters were gone. At 4:05 that afternoon, Virginia Revel unlocked the door to her house in Pont Street. She was just 27, tall, and of an exquisite slimness. Her hair was bronze. She had eyes of the deepest cornflower, and there was a radiant vitality about her that always challenged attention. She stepped into the hall to be immediately confronted by her butler, the impassive Chilvers.
"A person has called to see you, ma'am. I was reluctant to let him in. The man appears to be some kind of foreigner, but he said his business was most important, connected with the late Captain Revel. I put him in the study."
Virginia stood thinking for a minute. She had been a widow now for some years. Her husband had been in the diplomatic service, and they'd been together in Herzoslovakia before the sensational murder of the King and Queen. This man might be a Herzoslovakian, some old servant who had fallen on evil days. She crossed the hall with her light, buoyant step and opened the study door. The visitor stood by the fireplace. He was tall and dark, and she did not think he was of Slavonic origin. Italian, possibly, or Spanish. "You wish to see me?" she asked. The man looked her over slowly. There was a veiled insolence in his manner. "You are Mrs. Timothy Revel?" "Yes." "It is good you consented to see me, Mrs. Revel. Otherwise I should have been compelled to do business with your husband." "You might have found some difficulty doing that," she remarked dryly. "I think not. I am very persistent. Perhaps you recognize this." He flourished something in his hand. "It appears to be a letter," Virginia said helpfully. "You know to whom it is addressed?" Virginia took the envelope from him. "To a Captain O'Neill, Rue de Cunel 15, Paris." "Will you read it, please?" Virginia drew out the enclosure and glanced at it. "This is a private letter, certainly not meant for my eyes." The man laughed sardonically. "I congratulate you on your admirable acting, Mrs. Revel. Nevertheless, you will hardly be able to deny the signature." Virginia turned the letter over. The signature, written in a delicate slanting hand, was Virginia Revel. Checking her astonishment, she turned again to the beginning of the letter and deliberately read it through. Then she stood lost in thought. "Well, madame, that is your name, is it not?" "Oh, yes, it's my name. But not my handwriting," Virginia might have added. "How did you find me out?" "Easy." He took from his pocket the page torn from a magazine, which Anthony Cade would have recognized. "I see," Virginia said. "You understand, of course, Mrs. Revel, that there are other letters." "Dear me, I have been frightfully indiscreet." She could see that her light tone puzzled him, and she was by now thoroughly enjoying herself. She smiled sweetly. "It's very kind of you to give them back to me." There was a pause. The man cleared his throat. "I am a poor man, Mrs. Revel," he said significantly, "and as such will doubtless find it easier to enter the kingdom of heaven." "I cannot afford to let you have those letters for nothing." "The law in this country is severe on blackmailers." "Come, Mrs. Revel. These are the letters of a woman to her lover, all breathing dread of discovery. Do you want me to take them to your husband?" Virginia smiled. "What is your price, then?" she asked in a businesslike tone. £1,000. "I shouldn't dream of paying you 1,000. "Madame, I never bargain. £1,000 and I will place the whole packet in your hands." Virginia reflected. "You really must give me a little time. It will not be easy to get such a sum together." "Then I will call again. But a few pounds on account, perhaps?" "Very well." Virginia crossed to a desk and took out an untidy handful of notes. "There's about £40 here. That will have to do." He snatched at it eagerly. "And now, please go. Come back tomorrow, about 6. There was nothing for Anthony to do but accept that the letters were gone. So was Giuseppe merely a clever hotel thief? Had his search of Anthony's suitcase been simply a part of his habitual professional tactics? Might he just have shoved the packet into his pocket mechanically? In which case, the thing was mere plain-or-garden robbery. But against that, there was the man's excitement when he'd caught sight of the papers lying on the table. No. Anthony felt convinced that Giuseppe had been acting as a tool for some outside agency. The comrades of the Red Hand, or more probably the Loyalist Party. He concluded that Giuseppe had mistaken a packet of letters, enclosed as they were in the other wrappings, for the memoirs themselves. That morning Anthony had a good breakfast while glancing at the papers, which were full of the new discoveries of oil in Herzoslovakia. Then he questioned the waiters and drew a complete blank. Giuseppe's bed had not been slept in, but nobody seemed to know anything of his private life or associates. "But I'll get you, my lad," Anthony murmured to himself. "I'll get you yet. It's only a matter of time." Anthony had just returned to his room when the telephone rang. "Hello!" A hearty voice struck upon his ear. "That Mr. McGrath?" "Speaking." "I'm Mr. Balderson of Balderson and Hodgkins." Ah, our worthy publishers, Anthony thought. "Now, what about that manuscript, Mr. McGrath?" "What about it?" "Well, everything. I understand you've just arrived from South Africa. That being so, you can't possibly understand the position. There's going to be trouble about the manuscript, Mr. McGrath, big trouble." "Indeed?" "I assure you it is so. There's a determined effort being made to prevent its ever reaching this office. For a month we've been bribed, cajoled, and threatened by one lot and another." "Dear me," murmured Anthony. "Therefore I'm anxious to get it into my possession as quickly as possible, so as to have a couple of copies made. Then, if the original is destroyed, well, no harm will be done. I say to you quite frankly, Mr. McGrath, that if you attempt to bring it yourself, it's 10 to 1 that you'll never get here. You're up against a very dangerous lot of people. My suggestion, consequently, is that you do not attempt to bring the manuscript here. Better one of our people call upon you at the hotel and take possession of it." "And supposing the gang does him in?" "Then the responsibility would be ours, not yours. You would have delivered it to our representatives. Now, the cheque for £1,000, which we are to hand you, will not, by the terms of our agreement with the executors, be available until Wednesday next. However, if you insist, I will send my own cheque for that amount by the messenger." Anthony reflected for a minute or two and realised the force of the publisher's arguments. "All right," he said. "Send your man along." "Certainly, Mr. McGrath. Our Mr. Holmes will call upon you first thing tomorrow morning." "Very well, then." With a thoughtful face, Anthony hung up the receiver. Duly, at 9 the following morning, Anthony handed over the manuscript to Mr. Holmes, a small, fair man with a quiet manner, and received in exchange a cheque for £1,000. Mr. Holmes wished Anthony good morning and departed. The whole thing seemed very tame. "Well, if one job's done with, the other isn't," Anthony said to himself. "Up to now I've bungled it. But never say die. I shall now go and have a look at Pont Street." He packed, went down and paid his bill, and ordered his luggage to be put in a taxi. He was on the point of being driven off when a page ran down the steps with a letter. "Just come for you, sir, this very minute." The letter was a curious document, written not in plain English, but in the peculiar style common to government officials. It referred obliquely to the memoirs of Count Stilptich, and begged Mr. McGrath to do nothing until he had had a confidential conversation with a Mr. George Lomax. It also contained an invitation to go down to Chimneys as the guest of Lord Caterham on the following day, Friday. "Dear old England," Anthony murmured affectionately, "behind the times, as usual." He re-entered the hotel, went into the writing-room, took a sheet of notepaper, and wrote rapidly, explaining that he had handed over the manuscript in question and regretfully declining the kind invitation of Lord Caterham, as he was leaving England almost immediately. "And now," Anthony said, as he affixed the stamp to the envelope, "to business, and exit James McGrath." Virginia Revel had been playing tennis at Ranelagh, and all the way back to Pont Street, as she lay back in the long limousine, a little smile played upon her lips. It was, of course, within the bounds of possibility that the blackmailer might not reappear, but she felt pretty certain that he would, and perhaps this time there would be a little surprise for him. "Will you be wanting the car again, ma'am?" said the chauffeur, when the car drew up at the house. Virginia reflected for a moment. "No, I shan't. I shall be away for the weekend. I'm going by the 6:40 from Paddington, and a taxi will do." She ran up the steps, delved into her bag in search of her latchkey, remembered she hadn't got it with her, and rang the bell. As she waited, a young man came up the steps. He was shabbily dressed and held out a leaflet with the legend, "Why did I serve my country?" plainly visible on it. In his other hand he held a collecting box. "Oh, I can't buy 2 of those awful poems in one day," said Virginia. "I bought one this morning. I did, honour bright." The young man laughed, and Virginia thought him a more pleasing specimen than usual of London's unemployed. She liked his brown face and the lean hardness of him. She even wished she had a job for him. But then the door was opened by her maid, Elise. "Where's Chilvers?" Virginia demanded sharply as she stepped into the hall. "Gone, madame, with the others." "Gone where?" "To Datchet, madame, as your telegram said." "Telegram? I never sent any telegram." "But voilà, madame. It is still on the table, là-bas." The telegram was addressed to Chilvers and ran, "Please take household to cottage and prepare for weekend party. Catch 5:49 train." There was nothing unusual about it. It was the sort of message she'd frequently sent before. Chilvers would not have seen anything wrong with it. "But it's a silly hoax," Virginia cried angrily. "You know perfectly well, Liz, that I'm going to Chimneys." "I thought Madame had changed her mind. Mon Dieu! If it should be the malefactors, the thieves. They send the bogus telegram and then rob the house." "Don't get so excited, Elise. They won't cut our throats at 6 in the afternoon." "Madame, I implore you, ring up the police at once." "Oh, don't be silly. Go and pack my things for Chimneys. Hurry up, there's a good girl. I'll speak to the police and tell them to keep an eye on the place." As Elise beat a speedy retreat up the stairs, Virginia crossed to the study to telephone. She opened the door and stopped. The blackmailer was sitting in the big armchair, and she knew at once he was dead. Knew it instinctively even before her eyes noted the small pistol on the floor and the hole above the heart with the dark stain round it. She looked at the telephone. She must ring up the police at once. But she stood quite still, paralysed with horror. The bogus telegram. Had it something to do with this? And she'd permitted the murdered man to blackmail her. Of course she hadn't written those letters. But would it be so easy to prove that? She pressed her hands to her forehead. "I must think," she said. "I simply must think." At that moment the front doorbell rang. Virginia jumped. Elise, she knew, wouldn't hear it upstairs. She went out into the hall, and with a long breath threw open the door. On the steps was the unemployed young man. "Come in," she said with relief. "I think I've got a job for you." She took him into the dining room and stared at him attentively. "Excuse me, but are you— Eton and Oxford. Come down in the world. That's what you wanted to ask me, wasn't it?" "Something of the kind," admitted Virginia. "I hope this isn't regular work you're offering me." She smiled. "No, it's very irregular. I'm in rather a hole, you see." "So, what's the trouble?" "There's a dead man in the next room. He's been murdered." The young man went up enormously in her estimation by the way he accepted her statement. "Excellent," he said. "I've always wanted to do a bit of amateur detective work. Will you give me the facts?" "I think I'd better." Virginia paused. "This man came to the house yesterday, wanting to blackmail me. He had certain letters with him. Love letters, signed with my name." "But which weren't written by you." "How did you know that?" "I deduced it. Go on." "Well, I don't know if you'll understand, but I— let him. You see, I'd never been blackmailed before." She looked at him appealingly, and he nodded. "You wanted to see what it felt like?" "That's exactly what I did feel. How frightfully clever of you." "I am clever," the young man said modestly. "Anyway, I told this man to come back today at 6 o'clock. I arrived home from Ranelagh, walked into the study, and found him shot." "Who let him in?" "I don't know. If my maid had, she'd have told me." "Does she know what's happened?" "I've told her nothing." The young man nodded. "Well, shall we view the body?" he said briskly. Virginia led the way. Then she paused. "By the way, you haven't told me your name." "My name? It's Anthony Cade." "He's still warm," said Anthony, as he bent over the figure in the chair. "He was killed less than half an hour ago." "Just before I came in," said Virginia. "Exactly." He stood upright. "Has your maid been in this room?" "No." "That's rather unfortunate, Mrs. Revel. If you'd discovered the body together, it would have simplified matters. The man would then definitely have been shot before you returned." "Whilst now they might say he was shot after. I see." Virginia was so engrossed in the suggestion that she did not wonder at this strange man's ready use of her name. "Why didn't Elise hear the shot, I wonder?" she murmured. Anthony pointed to the open window as a loud backfire came from a passing car. "There you are. London's not the place to notice a pistol shot." Virginia turned with a shudder to the body. "He looks Italian." "He is Italian. I'd say his profession was a waiter. He only did blackmailing in his spare time, and his name might be Giuseppe." "Heavens!" cried Virginia. "Is this Sherlock Holmes?" "No," Anthony said regretfully. "I'm cheating. I'll tell you about it later. Now, did you give this man any money?" "Yes." "How much?" £40. "But it's still bad," said Anthony. He took out his handkerchief and picked up the pistol. His voice, when he spoke, was terse. "Mrs. Revel, have you ever seen this pistol before?" "No." "Sure?" "Quite sure." "Have you a pistol of your own?" "No." He stared at her steadily for a minute, then held it out. It was small and deadly. Engraved on it was the name Virginia. "Oh, that's impossible," she cried. Her astonishment was so genuine that Anthony could not but believe it. He paused. "Whoever killed Giuseppe wished to incriminate you. They could get him anywhere, but they took extraordinary pains to get him here. Now, are the blackmailing letters still on him, I wonder? Anthony ran rapidly through the dead man's pockets. No, not a thing. He's been stripped clean. Hello, what's this? Hole in the lining. Something got caught there. Ah. He drew out a torn scrap of paper and brought it over to the light. Pity we haven't got the rest of it. Chimneys, 11:45 Thursday. Sounds like an appointment. Chimneys? Cried Virginia. How extraordinary. Why? I'm going there this evening. At least I was. Anthony stared at her. I begin to see. Suppose someone badly wanted to prevent your going to Chimneys. If you call the police, it's goodbye to your getting there today or tomorrow. I'd very much like you to go to Chimneys. I fancy it will disconcert our unknown friends. Mrs. Revel, will you put yourself in my hands? Yes. Can you get that maid of yours out of the house? Easily. Virginia went into the hall and called up the stairs. Anthony heard a rapid colloquy. Then the front door opened and shut, and Virginia came back. I sent her out for some scent. She's to follow by the next train. Good. Now we can dispose of the body. Is there a trunk in the house? Of course. In the basement. Very well. I'll attend to the next part. You go upstairs and get ready. Virginia obeyed. When she came down again, it was to find Anthony waiting in the hall with a neatly strapped trunk. Now, he said, it's going to be a busy evening. You call a taxi and leave the rest to me. It really is awfully good of you, said Virginia. It's dreadful saddling a perfect stranger with a dead body like this. Oh, I like it, returned Anthony nonchalantly. Can't you come down to Chimneys, Mr. Cade? I must talk to you. Oh, you'll see me before long, Mrs. Revel. I promise you that. Anthony drove out of London in the second-hand Morris Cowley he'd acquired earlier in the day, in case it should be necessary to his plans. The trunk was wedged securely in the back. Midway between Hounslow and Staines, he stopped. First he obscured his number plate with mud. Then, having waited until he heard no car coming in either direction, he opened the trunk, heaved out Giuseppe's body, and laid it neatly by the side of the road. The whole business had occupied exactly 1 minute and a half. Then he took the road once more. North, this time. It was just after 11:30 when he brought the car to rest in the road adjoining the park of Chimneys. Jumping out, he scaled the wall and set out towards the house. As the great grey mass of Chimneys loomed up out of the darkness, a stable clock chimed the 3/4. 11:45. The time mentioned on the scrap of paper. Anthony was on the terrace now, and everything seemed dark and quiet. They go to bed early, these politicians, he thought. Then suddenly, the sound of a shot rang out. It had come from within the house, he was sure. He waited, but everything was still as death. Finally, he went to one of the long French windows and tried the handle. It was locked. He listened intently, but the silence remained unbroken. In the end, he told himself he must have imagined the sound, and he began retracing his steps across the park. But vaguely uneasy, he looked back at the house, and whilst he looked, a light sprang up in one of the first-floor windows. In another minute it went out again, and the whole place was in darkness once more. Time, 8:30 a.m. Inspector Badgeworthy, a tall, portly man, is in his office. In attendance is Constable Johnson, new to the force, with a downy, unfledged look about him, like a human chicken. The telephone rings sharply. The inspector picks it up. "Police station, Market Basing." "What?" Long pause. Finally, "At once, my lord." Badgeworthy lays the receiver down and turns to Johnson. "Murder.
At Chimneys.
Murder?
Murder it is. One of his lordship's guests. Shot. A foreign gentleman.
A foreigner. This makes the murder seem less real. Foreigners, Johnson feels, are liable to be shot. But Badgeworthy is in seventh heaven. A murder. Badgeworthy in charge.
We'll get hold of Dr. Cartwright, he says. Take him with us right away.
They stopped at Dr. Cartwright's, then all three drove off briskly for Chimneys. They were received by a white-headed butler, who led them to a small, cosy room, which was Lord Caterham's refuge.
The police, my lord, and Dr. Cartwright.
Ah, Inspector, at last. How are you, Cartwright? This is a very devil of a business, a very devil. Lord Caterham was running his hands frenziedly through his hair till it stood upright in little tufts. "Where's the body?" asked the doctor in business-like fashion. "In the council chamber," said Lord Caterham.
"And who discovered it?" asked the inspector. "You?"
"Good Lord, no. I don't usually get up at this unearthly hour. No, a housemaid found it. She screamed a good deal, I believe."
"And the body is one of your guests?" said Badgeworthy.
"That's right, Inspector."
"By name?"
This perfectly simple question seemed to upset Lord Caterham. You mean, what was his name?"
"Yes, my lord."
"Well, his name was, yes, Count Stanislaus." At that moment the door opened, and a girl came into the room. She was slim and dark, with a boyish face. This was Lady Eileen Brent, Lord Caterham's daughter, commonly known as Bundle. She addressed her father directly. "He's coming over at once." "What did he say?" "We are to use the utmost discretion." Her father snorted.
"Yes, that's just the sort of idiotic thing George Lomax would say. However, once he comes, I shall wash my hands of the whole affair. And now, gentlemen, I'll take you to the council chamber."
They followed Lord Caterham into a big room panelled in oak, with 3 French windows giving onto the terrace. There was a long refectory table, some beautiful old chairs, and on the walls various paintings of dead Caterhams and others. About halfway between the door and the window, a man was lying on his back, his arms flung wide. Dr. Cartwright knelt by the body while the inspector strode to the windows and examined them. The centre one was closed, but not fastened. On the steps outside were footprints leading up to the window, and a second set going away again.
"Well," said Lord Caterham, eager to escape, "I'll leave you here. You'll find me... Yes, Treadwell?"
The butler was hovering deferentially at the door.
"I've taken the liberty, my lord, of advancing the breakfast hour. Everything is ready in the dining-room."
Bundle slipped her hand through her father's arm, and they entered the dining-room together. "I'm damned hungry," she said. "Must be the excitement." Suddenly the sound of a motor being driven at great speed was heard through the open window. "Ah, codders!" cried Bundle.
"This is a terrible calamity, terrible, terrible," said George Lomax. "Have some haddock," said Lord Caterham hospitably.
George Lomax waved his hand impatiently.
No, I don't want any food. This must be hushed up at all costs. Have you told anyone yet?" "Well, the local police. And Cartwright."
George groaned.
"Now pull yourself together, my dear fellow," Lord Caterham said kindly. "You can't hush up a body, you know."
George became suddenly calm.
"No, you're right, Caterham. But the local police won't do. We must have battle."
"Battle? Murder and sudden death?" Lord Caterham was puzzled.
No. I refer to Superintendent Battle of Scotland Yard, a man of the utmost discretion. I must send off some wires at once. We must waste no time."
Lord Caterham spent the morning making a tour of his estate, until the pangs of hunger drew him homeward. By now, he reflected, the worst would surely be over. However, as he sneaked into the house by a side door, Treadwell presented himself.
"Excuse me, my lord, but Mr. Lomax is anxious to see you in the library."
Lord Caterham sighed and crossed the wide spaces of his ancestral home to the library door. "Ah, come in," said Lomax. "We were wondering what had become of you." The other man in the room was squarely built and middle-aged, with a face singularly devoid of expression. "Superintendent Battle arrived half an hour ago," George explained. "He's seen Inspector Badgeworthy, and now wants a few facts from us." They all sat down. "I understand," said Battle, "that the dead gentleman was called Count Stanislaus. Was that his real name?" "It was not," said Lomax. "And what was?" "Prince Michael of Herzoslovakia." Battle's eyes opened just a trifle. "And what was the purpose of his visit here?" "In the strictest confidence, Battle." "Of course, Mr. Lomax." "Prince Michael was here to arrange a loan with Mr. Hermann Isaacstein. In the event of his coming to the throne, Prince Michael, in view of his pronounced British sympathies, pledged himself to grant certain oil concessions to companies in which Mr. Isaacstein is interested." "Was anyone else after those concessions?" "I do believe an American group of financiers had made overtures to His Highness." "And been turned down?" But George refused to be drawn. "Prince Michael's sympathies were entirely pro-British," he stated. Battle did not press the point. "Lord Caterham," he said, "I understand Prince Michael was accompanied here by his valet, Boris Anchukov, but that his equerry, Captain Andrassy, remained in town. The prince, on arriving, declared himself greatly fatigued and retired to his rooms, so did not meet the other members of the house party. Is that correct?" "Quite correct." "And this morning a housemaid discovered the body at approximately 7:45 a.m. Death was the result of a revolver bullet, but no revolver was found, and no one seems to have heard the shot. Now, what time did you retire to bed last night?" "Early. About 10:30, I'd say." "Thank you. Now, who was in the house?" "Prince Michael, his valet, Mr. Isaacstein, Mr. Eversley, who works in my department," George put in. "I see. Go on, Lord Caterham." "Mr. Hiram Fish." "Who is he?" "He's an American," said Lord Caterham. "Well, Mr. Fish was specially anxious to see my first editions. He's an enthusiast, and Mr. Lomax had suggested I ask one or two extra people down this weekend to make things seem more natural. As for the ladies, there's only Mrs. Revel, although I expect she brought a maid or something. Then there's my eldest daughter, the children, their governess, and all the servants." "Thank you." "I suppose," George put in ponderously, "there's no doubt the murderer entered by the window?" Battle paused for a moment. "There were footsteps leading up to and away from the window. A car stopped outside the park at 11:40 last night, and at 12 o'clock a young man engaged a room at the Jolly Cricketers. He put his boots out to be cleaned. They were wet and muddy, as though he'd been walking through the park." George leant forward eagerly. "Could the boots be compared to the footprints?" "They were. They correspond exactly." "Well, then we have the murderer. What's his name?" "Anthony Cade." "Then he must be pursued at once." "We won't need to," said Battle. "Why?" "Because he's still there." "What?" "Curious, isn't it?" A discreet knock came at the door. Treadwell stood on the threshold. "My lord, a gentleman wishes to see you on urgent business, connected, I understand, with this morning's tragedy." "What's his name?" Battle asked. "Mr. Anthony Cade, sir." Lord Caterham began to chuckle. "Show him in, Treadwell. Show him in." "I must apologise for forcing my way in like this," said Anthony, entering, "but it's rumoured round your local pub that you've had a murder up here, and when I asked for my boots I learned that some nice young constable had them, so I put two and two together and hurried up here. I might be able to throw some light on your murder,
George cleared his throat. "When you say light, you mean—"
"I mean I was trespassing on Lord Caterham's property last night at about 11:45. I heard the shot." He looked at Battle. "I can fix the time of the crime for you, Inspector." "It is, Inspector, isn't it?" Lord Caterham interposed. He was beginning to take a fancy to Anthony. "No, it's Superintendent Battle, of Scotland Yard, and this is Mr. Lomax." Anthony looked sharply at George. "Mr. George Lomax?" "Yes." "I think I had a letter from you yesterday." "I think not." George stared at him coldly. "You were about to explain what you were doing in the grounds last night." Anthony braced himself. In the short space of 24 hours he'd become embroiled in 2 separate crimes. But he'd already decided to tell the truth, with one alteration, and one grave suppression. "I came to England from Bulawayo," he began, "to carry out a commission for a friend of mine, a Mr. James McGrath." He brought out the name slowly, with his eye on George, who repressed an exclamation with difficulty. "I travelled as McGrath, since the passage was booked in his name. On arrival in London, I went to the Blitz Hotel. My business was to deliver a certain manuscript to a firm of publishers. That night my room was broken into, and an attempted burglary was made by one of the waiters. The next day the publishers rang me up and suggested that one of their representatives receive the manuscript, to which I agreed. The arrangement was duly carried out yesterday. Yesterday also, still as McGrath, I received a letter from Mr. Lomax. In this letter," Anthony continued, "Mr. Lomax referred to the manuscript and extended an invitation from Lord Caterham to join the party here." "And delighted to see you, my dear fellow," said the nobleman. "Better late than never, eh?" "And is that your explanation of your presence here last night?" Battle asked. "Certainly not," said Anthony warmly. "When I'm asked to a country house, I don't usually scale the wall. No. After regretfully declining the kind invitation, I remembered something." Anthony paused. The moment had come for skating over thin ice. "In my struggle with the hotel waiter, I wrested from him a small piece of paper with some words on, which conveyed nothing to me at the time, but the mention of chimneys in Mr. Lomax's letter recalled them to me. Here is the paper, gentlemen. See for yourselves. The words are, 'Chimneys, 11:45, Thursday.'" Battle examined the paper attentively, while Anthony continued, "Of course, undoubtedly this waiter Giuseppe was a thieving rascal, so I made up my mind to motor down and put Lord Caterham on his guard in case some mischief should be intended. However, I was late getting here, so I climbed over the wall. When I arrived on the terrace, the house was dark and silent. Then I heard a shot. From inside the house, I fancied. I tried the windows, but they were fastened, and the whole place was as still as the grave, so I decided I'd made a mistake. This morning, of course, I realised I was a suspicious character, bound to be, so came here to tell my story." There was a pause. "One thing I'd like to know," Battle said, looking at George Lomax. "What was this manuscript?" The memoirs of the late Count Stilptich. You see—" "You needn't say anything more. I see perfectly." Battle turned again to Anthony. "Do you know who was shot, Mr. Cade?" "Count Stanislaus, or some such." "Tell him, Mr. Lomax." George was clearly reluctant. "It was His Highness, Prince Michael of Herzoslovakia." Anthony whistled. Deuced awkward, that. Battle rose abruptly to his feet. "Mr. Cade, there are questions I'd like to ask you. In the council chamber, if I may." The body had been moved, but there was a dark stain where it had lain. "Now," said the superintendent, "you tried the windows, didn't you?" "Yes. Fastened from the inside, all 3. "Sure, sir?" "Sure." "Well, that's funny." "What's funny?" "This morning the middle one was unlatched." "That's a blow. said Anthony, taking out his cigarette case. "Either someone unlatched the window after I'd gone to make it look like an outside job, or I'm lying." Anthony felt strongly the need of being on his guard. "What was he shot with? A revolver?"
"Yes."
"Wasn't it found?"
"No."
"No clues of any kind?"
"Well, we've got this."
After the manner of a conjurer, Battle produced a sheet of notepaper. Anthony recognised the design upon it. "Aha! The Red Hand. Where was this found?"
"Under the body. You've seen it before, sir?"
Anthony recounted to him his short encounter with the comrade. Superintendent Battle smiled. Then he said suddenly,
"Would you have any objection to seeing the body?"
"None whatever," Anthony said agreeably. The body was in one of the smaller drawing-rooms. It lay on a table covered with a sheet, which Battle whisked away.
"Do you recognise him, Mr. Cade?"
"Yes, I've seen him before," said Anthony. "But not as Prince Michael Obolovich. He purported to come from Messrs. Balderson and Hodgkins, and he called himself Mr. Holmes." Superintendent Battle replaced the sheet, and Anthony stood with his hands in his pockets. "So that's what a lollipop meant by other means," he murmured.
"Mr. Cade?"
"Nothing," said Anthony. They returned to the council chamber, where they found a tall man with neatly parted black hair, china blue eyes, and a large, placid face. "Pardon me, gentlemen," he said. "Is it permitted to inspect the scene of the crime? I take it you are from Scotland Yard." "This gentleman is," said Anthony. "Superintendent Battle." "Pleased to meet you, sir. Hiram P. Fish. Crime is one of my hobbies. I've written a monograph on this subject, Degeneracy and the Criminal." As he spoke, his eyes went round the room. "My, there's some remarkable pictures in this room. I'm interested in pictures as well as first editions." He sighed gently. "Well, I guess the party's off now. I suppose the guests should return to town."
"No, sir," said Battle. "Nobody must leave until after the inquest."
"And when is that?"
"Tomorrow, maybe."
Battle led the way to the door.
"We'd best get out of here. We need to keep it locked."
As they left the council chamber, two other figures came into sight at the far end of the corridor. "Aha!" said Fish. "Our genial host, and with him a very bright lady whose name I did not catch last night." With Lord Caterham was Virginia Revel. Anthony had been anticipating this meeting, but had no idea how to act. He must leave it to her. "Why, Mr. Cade," she said, holding both hands out to him. "So you could come, after all."
"I'd no idea Mr. Cade was a friend of yours, Mrs. Revel," said Lord Caterham.
"He's a very old friend." Virginia smiled mischievously at Anthony. "I ran across him in London yesterday, and I told him I was coming here." Anthony was quick to give her pointer. "Yes, I explained to Mrs. Revel that I'd been forced to refuse your kind invitation, since it had really been extended to quite a different man."
"Well, my dear fellow, that's over and done with now. I'll send for your bag."
"It's very kind of you, but—"
"Nonsense. Of course, you must come here."
"Yes, you must," said Virginia softly. "You can be useful and take me out on the lake. Come on." The others watched them go out through the garden door.
"Nice fellow, that," said Lord Caterham. "By the way, Battle, Mr. Lomax has been asking for you. He's in the blue morning room."
"Ah, Battle," said Lomax, who was striding impatiently up and down the room. There was one other person there, a big man sitting by the fireplace. He was dressed in English shooting clothes, which sat strangely on him. He had a fat yellow face, a generous curve to his big nose, and black eyes, as impenetrable as those of a cobra. "This is Mr. Isaacstein," said Lomax. Battle inclined his head. He knew all about Isaacstein, and though the great financier sat there silent, Battle knew who
who was the real power in the room. "Now," said George, "what do you think of this fellow Cade?" Battle shrugged. "He tells a straight story. I shall cable South Africa, of course, for some information." "And what is your idea about the crime, Superintendent?" Isaacstein asked. "It's rather soon yet, sir. My first question is always the same. Motive. Who benefits by Prince Michael's death?" Battle paused. "Which brings me to my next question. Who is the next heir to the throne of Herzoslovakia?" "Well, in all probability," said George, "I'd say Prince Nicholas, Prince Michael's first cousin." "Oh. But really nothing much is known of him," George continued. "As a young man he was most peculiar, consorting with socialists, and he was, I believe, sent down from Oxford. There was a rumour of his death in the Congo, but it was only a rumour. A few months ago he turned up again when news of the royalist reaction got about." "Where did he turn up?" Battle asked. "In America." "America?" Battle turned to Isaacstein. "Oil?" The financier nodded. "He represented that the Herzoslovakians would prefer him to Prince Michael, and in return for financial support he was prepared to grant concessions to a group of Wall Street financiers." "I see. And then this happens." Battle looked thoughtful. "I think, Mr. Lomax, there's one other matter we ought to take into account. King Victor's in England." Lomax frowned. "King Victor?" "Notorious French jewel thief, sir. We've had a warning from the Sûreté." "Yes, of course. And that's the man—" George broke off abruptly. Isaacstein was conscious of a certain constraint in the atmosphere. "You don't want me here any longer, do you?" he inquired. "No, my dear fellow, thank you." The financier left, closing the door behind him, and George began to pace the room again. "What you say disturbs me greatly, Superintendent. I thought King Victor was in prison." "Came out a few months ago." "But what should he be doing in England?" "That's for you to say, sir." "Ah, yes. I can see you know the story. An unparalleled catastrophe." "The Koh-i-Noor," said Battle, reflectively. "Hush, Battle. I beg of you, no names. If you must speak of it, call it the K. But you don't connect Victor with this crime, do you?" "It's a possibility. You'll remember there were 4 places where he might have concealed the jewel. Chimneys was one. King Victor was arrested in Paris 3 days after the K's disappearance. Now, suppose Victor came here to look for the thing, was surprised by Prince Michael, and shot him." "It's possible." "But not much more," agreed Battle. "King Victor has never been known to take a life. All the same—" "Yes?" "I'd like to question the Prince's servant. We'll have him in, sir, if you don't mind." "Boris and Chukov?" "Yes." The valet was a tall, fair man with high cheekbones and deep-set blue eyes. His voice was harsh. "When did you see your master last?" "His Highness retired at 10:30. I slept in the anteroom next to him, but I did not hear him go downstairs. I have been an unfaithful servant. I am accursed." "You loved your master, eh?" said Battle, watching the valet closely. "English policeman, I say this to you. I would have died for him, and I shall not rest until I have avenged him." Suddenly he drew an immense knife from beneath his coat. "Like a dog, I will nose out his murderer. I will slit his nose, cut off his ears, and put out his eyes, and then—" The words came out as a snarl. "Into his black heart I will thrust this knife." "Oh dear, isn't this dreadful?" said Virginia. She and Anthony were walking down the path to the lake. "I'm bursting with things I want to know. First of all, what have you done with the body?" Anthony ran over the events of the previous night. Virginia listened attentively. "The Scotland Yard man is convinced of your innocence now, isn't he?"
I'm not sure. I think he's stumped by my apparent lack of motive. Apparent? What possible reason could you have for murdering an unknown foreign count? Anthony darted a sharp glance at her. You were in Herzoslovakia, weren't you? Yes, with my husband, at the embassy. Did you ever run across Prince Michael? Of course. Horrid little wretch. Why the interest? I take it you didn't meet the murdered man last night? No. He went straight to his room as soon as he arrived. And you haven't seen the body? Virginia shook her head. Could you get to see it, do you think? Anthony asked. Why? Because Count Stanislaus was the incognito of Prince Michael. Virginia's eyes opened wide. I see, she said. Anthony continued. You realize you're the only person here who knew Prince Michael by sight. You mean that the murdered man could have been an impostor? The possibility had crossed my mind. Are you suggesting he went straight to his rooms to avoid seeing me? Something of the kind. You see, if I'm right, someone wanted to prevent your coming to Chimneys, and the reason seems to lie in your knowing Herzoslovakia. So if you can get Lord Caterham to show you the body... By now, they had arrived at the boathouse. Well, now for the whole story, said Anthony. We'll paddle gently about on the lake, secure from prying ears. And then, for the second time that morning, Anthony unfolded the history of the last 6 weeks of his life, finishing with his own astonished recognition of Mr. Holmes. Now, Virginia said, one question I do have for you. When I said I hadn't written those letters, you said you knew I hadn't. You couldn't know any such thing. Oh, but I could. The Virginia Revel of those letters was scared stiff. But you'd never lie down to be blackmailed. You'd have fought. Anthony lit a cigarette. You know one of those letters was written from Chimneys. What? Odd, isn't it? I'm beginning to think the person who wrote those letters used your name deliberately. But why? Ah, that's just the question. There's a devil of a lot to find out. Then let's get to work. I see Lord Caterham and Bundle strolling together. The first thing is to find out definitely whether the dead man is Michael or not. Anthony rowed to shore, and they joined Lord Caterham and his daughter. Where do you pick up these nice-looking men, Virginia? Said Bundle. You can have him, darling, Virginia said generously, but be nice to him. I want Lord Caterham. Virginia slipped her hand through the peer's arm, and they moved off together. Bundle looked earnestly at Anthony. Do you talk? She asked. Or are you strong and silent? I ask questions sometimes. For instance? Anthony pointed to the house. Who occupies the room second on the left, from the end? What an extraordinary question. Let me see. Yes, that's Mademoiselle Brun's room, the governess. She endeavours to keep Dulcie and Daisy in order, my young sisters. And how long has Mademoiselle been with you? 2 months. God! What's that? That was a taxi approaching the house. Its 2 occupants were a man with a black beard and a younger man with a black moustache. Baron Lollipop, said Anthony. Baron what? Lollipop. The true pronunciation tends to harden the arteries. Well, excuse me, Mr. Cade. I'd better go and stand by father. Bundle retreated rapidly to the house, and Anthony, still standing by the boathouse, lit a cigarette. As he did so, his ear was caught by the sound of someone trying to stifle a sneeze. He walked round the corner of the boathouse and came upon a man of respectable appearance, who wore a light-coloured overcoat and glasses, and who had a short, pointed black beard. "What are you doing here?" Anthony asked. "Pardon," said the stranger. "It is that I want to return to the Jolly Cricketers, but I have lost my way. I thought I would come up here and inquire. Would monsieur direct me?" "This is private, you know. You're trespassing. Go round the lake and turn left onto the path." "Many thanks, monsieur." "Don't mention it." murmured Anthony, as he watched the other's retreating form. A French governess and a mysterious Frenchman found slinking round the grounds. I'll bet my hat there's something in that. He retraced his steps to the house, and on the terrace encountered Lord Caterham and the two new arrivals. "Ah, Mr. Cade, let me introduce you to Baron, and Captain Andrassy." The Baron stared at Anthony.
"Mr. Cade,"
he said stiffly.
"I think not."
"A word alone, Baron," said Anthony, and the two men walked along the terrace. "Baron, I must throw myself upon your mercy. I represented myself to you as Mr. McGrath. You wanted the man in possession of the memoirs. I was that man. As you know only too well, I am no longer in possession of them. It was a very neat trick, Baron. Who thought of it?"
"His Highness' own idea it was."
"He did it jolly well. I took him for an Englishman."
"The English education did the Prince receive. The custom of Herzoslovakia it is."
"May I ask what has become of those papers?"
"His Highness' purpose was to read them, and then by fire destroy them."
"I see," said Anthony. "Well, I should give you fair warning. It is still my intention to deliver that manuscript to the publishers on Wednesday next." The Baron stared at him.
"But you have no longer got it."
"I have 5 days to get hold of it again."
"But if it is burnt?"
"Oh, I don't think it is burnt." As Anthony spoke, a massive figure turned the corner of the terrace and advanced towards them.
"Ah, Baron,"
said Hermann Isaacstein, waving a big cigar.
"This is a very bad business." "It is indeed, my friend. Our noble edifice in ruins is—"
Anthony tactfully left them to their lamentations. At that moment 2 high-spirited children burst out of the house, and though their names might be Dulcie and Daisy, they appeared to be known as Guggle and Winkle. They executed a kind of war dance, with shrill whoops, till Bundle emerged and quelled them. "Where's Mademoiselle?" she demanded. "She's got the migraine, the migraine, the migraine," chanted Winkle. "Hurrah!" added Guggle. The resonant boom of a gong sounded, and Treadwell appeared from a side door.
"Luncheon, my lord, is served."
As Lord Caterham was shepherding his guests into the house, Virginia appeared and put her hand on Anthony's arm. "I've done my good deed," she whispered. "I got Lord Caterham to take me to see the body." "Well?" "You were wrong. It's Prince Michael, all right." "Virginia told me to be nice to you," Bundle said to Anthony, as they left the table after lunch. "And nice to you I'm going to be. By force, if necessary." They strolled out into the park. "There's another question I'd like to ask you," said Anthony. "Where did you get your governess from?" "From an agency, and her name is Geneviève." "What about her references?" "Glowing. 10 years with the Comtesse de Breteuil in Dinard." "You spoke to the Comtesse? Or was it done by letter?" "By letter," said Bundle. Said Anthony. "What do you suspect, Mr. Cade?" "Nothing. It's probably sheer idiocy on my part. Let's forget it. I say, is that another suspicious stranger I see standing down by the boathouse? Or is it one of the house party?" "Oh, it's Bill Eversley, George's assistant." "He seems to be looking for something." "Me, probably," said Bundle, without enthusiasm. "Oh, well, somebody's got to look after him, I suppose." "And what's to become of me?" "Be careful, or the children will rope you in." "I'm rather fond of children. Don't say I didn't warn you." About an hour later, as Anthony wiped his forehead, he was urgently invited to come and have tea in the schoolroom. He inquired after Mademoiselle's migraine, and was pleased to hear she'd entirely recovered. "You will come, won't you?" said Guggle. "You won't forget." Anthony swore solemnly that nothing should prevent him. As the youthful pair beat a retreat towards the house, Anthony stood in a brown study. Suddenly he became aware of Superintendent Battle standing beside him.
Lost in thought, Mr. Cade?
Indeed, but you're just the man I wanted to see. I want to go away. Can it be done?
That depends, sir. Where?
Dinard, to the chateau of Madame la Comtesse de Breteuil.
When?
Tomorrow? I'd be back by Sunday evening.
I see.
Well?
I've no objection. You've made a favourable impression on me, Mr. Cade. I'd like you to work with me. The amateur and the professional, they go well together.
Well, I've always wanted to try my hand at unravelling a murder mystery. But for the moment I fear I must leave you. I have an appointment in the schoolroom. Anthony entered the schoolroom to be greeted with squeals of joy. Guggle and Winkle immediately rushed him to be introduced to Mademoiselle Brun, who was a small, middle-aged woman with a sallow face, pepper-and-salt hair, and a budding moustache. As a notorious foreign adventuress, she did not fit into the picture at all. However, she was evidently delighted to have a young man invade her schoolroom, and the meal was a success. But that evening, alone in his bedchamber, Anthony began pacing the floor. I'm wrong, he thought. I'm making the most utter fool of myself. Somehow I can't get the hang of this thing. Then he stopped, as his door was softly opened, and a man slipped into the room, a big fair man with fanatic eyes. Who the devil are you?
I am Boris Anchukov. My master is dead. Now I serve you.
Well, it's very kind of you, but I don't happen to need a valet.
You are my master now. I will serve you faithfully.
Stepping forward, he dropped on one knee and placed Anthony's hand on his forehead.
To the death.
Then he rose swiftly and left the room as suddenly as he had come. The inquest on Prince Michael took place on the following morning, and it satisfied even George Lomax in its rigid suppression of all interesting details. Superintendent Battle and the coroner, working together, had reduced the proceedings to the lowest level of boredom. And immediately after the inquest, Anthony took an unostentatious departure. That night Bill Eversley awoke suddenly in his bedroom to find Virginia Revel leaning over him, shaking him by the shoulder. "Wake up, Bill. Oh, do wake up."
"Hello,"
he said dazedly. "What's the matter? Are you properly awake now?"
"I think so,"
Bill said doubtfully. "Things are happening in the council chamber. I heard a door bang somewhere and went down. There was a light in the room, and I peeped through the keyhole. I couldn't see much, but what I could see was very peculiar."
"Burglars?"
"I'm not sure. Why should burglars take a man in armour to pieces?"
"Well, they can't very well take him away whole, I suppose."
"Anyway, get up," Virginia demanded. Bill obediently slipped out of bed. "Wait while I don a pair of boots. I'm not going to tackle criminals in bare feet. Don't you want a gas mask and a shirt of chainmail as well?" "No." Bill wriggled into a lurid silk dresser gown and picked up a poker. "Right. I'm ready." They crept out of the room and down the wide double staircase. "How many of them are there?" "I couldn't see. They only had a flashlight." They crept along the passage and halted outside the oak door to the chamber. Bill applied his eye to the keyhole. The drama being enacted inside was out of his line of vision, but a subdued chink every now and then pointed to the fact that the invaders were still dealing with an armoured figure. There were two of these, he remembered, standing by the wall, under the Holbein portrait. An electric torch was evidently being directed upon the operations, leaving the rest of the room in darkness. Then presently there came a new sound, a faint tap-tap, as of knuckles on wood. Bill stood up. "You know where the light switch is?" "Yes, by the door." "I want to get well into the room. When I say go, switch on the lights. Understand?" "Perfectly." "And don't scream or faint." Bill grasped the poker firmly and softly turned the door handle. Noiselessly they moved into the room. At the farther end of the room The torch was playing on the Holbein picture. Silhouetted against it was the figure of a man standing on a chair, gently tapping the panelling. Unfortunately, at that moment Bill's boot nails squeaked on the parquet floor. The man swung round, directing the powerful torch full upon them, and dazzling them with the sudden glare. "Go!" Bill roared, and he sprang for his man, as Virginia obediently pressed the switch. There was a click, but the room remained in darkness. Bill cursed. The torch fell to the ground, extinguishing itself, and there was a sound of a desperate struggle in the darkness. Virginia hardly knew what to do. Her one idea was to stay in the doorway so that anyone trying to escape should not leave that way. And at the same time, she disobeyed Bill's instructions and screamed loudly for help. She heard doors opening upstairs, and light gleamed from the hall. But at that minute there was a terrific upheaval, and armour crashed to the ground with a deafening noise. Virginia heard Bill cursing and saw dimly a figure springing for the window. She rushed wildly for the intruder, but the window was unlatched and the figure sprang out, racing away down the terrace. Virginia raced after him and turned the corner of the house only to run headlong into a man who was emerging from a side door. "Gee, Mrs. Revel!" Hiram P. Fish exclaimed. "I beg your pardon. I took you for one of the thugs." "He's just passed this way. Can't we catch him?" But as she spoke, Virginia knew it was too late. The man must have gained the park by now, and it was a dark night with no moon. She retraced her steps to the council chamber, Fish by her side, to where Lord Caterham, Bundle, and various frightened servants were standing in the doorway. "What is it?" asked Bundle. "Burglars?" Virginia explained the events of the night. "How frightfully exciting," Bundle said. "So what's the matter with the lights in here?" That mystery was soon explained. The bulbs had been removed and laid in a row against the wall. "How many of them were there?" Bundle asked. Virginia hesitated. "Only one, I think." Certainly only one man had passed through the window, but as she'd rushed after him, she'd had a vague impression of a rustle somewhere close at hand. If so, that second person could have escaped through the door. But perhaps it was only her imagination. Suddenly Bill appeared at the window, breathing hard. "Damn the fellow! I've been hunting all over, not a sign." "Well," said Lord Caterham, "what now? Back to bed, I suppose." He yawned. "That beggar Isaacstein sleeps soundly. You'd have thought all this row would have brought him down." Then he looked at Mr. Fish. "I see you found time to dress." "Yes," admitted the American. "Very sensible. Damn chilly things, pyjamas." And the house party retired to bed. The first person Anthony saw as he alighted from his train the following afternoon was Superintendent Battle. "You see, I've returned according to contract." He smiled. "Going to London?" "I am, Mr. Cade. And how did your little job go?" "I've drawn a blank. Proved hopelessly wrong."
"And what was the idea, sir, if I may ask?"
"I suspected the governess. There was a light in her room on the night of the tragedy."
"Not much to go upon,"
remarked Battle. "Right, but I discovered a suspicious Frenchman spying round the place."
"Ah, you mean Monsieur Shell, staying at the Cricketers, a traveller in silk?"
"Oh," said Anthony, somewhat deflated. "Well, I put two and two together. French governess in the house, French stranger outside, and decided they were in league together. So I hurried off to interview the Comtesse, with whom Mademoiselle Brune said she lived for 10 years, fully prepared to find she'd never heard of any such person. But I was wrong. Mademoiselle is the genuine article."
Battle nodded. "By the way, Mr. Cade, what do you think of that curious business at Staines?"
"Staines?"
"Yes. It was in yesterday's papers. Man found shot by the roadside. A foreigner, as yet unidentified."
"Yes, I did see something about it," Anthony said carelessly. "No connection with Prince Michael's death, though, is there?" His eyes were steady.
"No. Well, I dare say there's nothing in it," said Battle.
And he turned away as the London train came thundering in. Anthony strolled across the park in a thoughtful mood, and as he drew near the house, he looked up at the windows. Was he quite sure that the one where he'd seen the light was the second from the end? And he made a discovery. There was an angle at the corner of the house in which was a window set farther back. Standing on one spot, you counted this window as the first, but move a few yards to the right, and this window was invisible. So clearly, it was quite possible he'd been mistaken in describing the light as occurring in the second room from the end. It might well have been the third. In the drawing-room, Treadwell had just set the tea tray in place. "Treadwell," Anthony said, "tell me, who has the third room from the end on the west side? Over the council chamber, I mean." Treadwell reflected. "That would be the American gentleman, sir." "Thank you." At that moment Virginia came in with Lord Caterham and Mr. Fish. She smiled a welcome at Anthony. "Ah, you're back, Mr. Cade." "Do pour out, Virginia," said Lord Caterham. "I don't know where Bundle is." Virginia officiated, then came across to Anthony. "Come to the boathouse after tea," she said in a low voice. "Bill and I have a lot to tell you." The meeting at the boathouse was duly held, and the story of the previous night's adventure related to Anthony. "So, what do you make of it?" he asked Virginia. "I think the burglar idea is absurd. They were looking for something." "Clearly something they thought was concealed in the armour. But then why tap the panelling? That looks more as though they were looking for a secret staircase or something." "Well, I know there's a priest's hole at Chimneys," said Virginia. "And a secret staircase as well, I believe. But what can they have been looking for?" "It can't be the memoirs. They're a great bulky package." Anthony frowned. It must have been something small. Now, to me, the whole question resolves itself into this. Did they find what they were looking for? "And supposing they didn't?" asked Virginia. "They'll come again. Battle's in London. So possibly they'll take the risk and come again tonight." "You really think so?" "It's a chance. Eversley and I will conceal ourselves in the council chamber." "What about me?" "This is men's work, Virginia," said Bill. "Don't be an idiot. You're not going to leave me out of it. I'm in." And thus it was settled. After the party had retired to bed that night, the three of them crept down. All were armed with torches, and in the pocket of Anthony's coat lay a revolver. He stood in the shadow of an old oak dresser. Virginia crouched behind an armour figure, and Bill was by the window. The minutes passed at interminable length. 1 o'clock chimed, then the half-hour, then 2. Anthony felt stiff and cramped. Then suddenly all his senses were on the alert, a footstep on the terrace outside, and then a low scratching at the window. The three watchers held their breath as the window swung open and a man stepped into the room. He stood quite still for a moment, as though listening, then switched on a torch and went over to the bit of panelled wall he'd been examining the night before. And suddenly a terrible knowledge smote Bill. He was going to sneeze. Nothing on earth would stop it. He held his nose and pinched it violently, but it was of no avail. He sneezed. The stranger sprang round, and Anthony acted. "Lights!" he shouted. Then he flashed on his torch and jumped full for the stranger. Virginia ran to the switch and the lights came on. Anthony was on top of his man. "And now, my fine fellow, let's see who you are," he panted. He rolled his victim over. It was the dark-bearded stranger from the cricketers. "Very nice indeed," said an approving voice. They all looked round, startled. The bulky form of Superintendent Battle was standing in the doorway. "I thought you were in London, Superintendent," said Anthony. Battle's eyes twinkled. "Did you, sir?" "May I get up, gentlemen?" the stranger inquired. Anthony kindly hauled him upright. "Pardon," the Frenchman said, looking at Battle. "You are from Scotland Yard?" "Oh, that's right." "Then, my credentials." He took some papers from his pocket and handed them to the detective. Battle looked through them and smiled. "Monsieur, I'm sorry you've been manhandled, but you brought it on yourself, you know." Then he turned to the others. "This is a colleague we've been expecting for some time, Monsieur Lemoine of the Sûreté." They all stared at the French detective. He smiled. "But yes, it is true." There was a pause. "Superintendent." "Mrs. Revel?" "Please enlighten us a little." "Monsieur," Lemoine turned to Battle, "did you just address Madame by the name of Revel?" "That is my name," said Virginia. "Your husband was in the diplomatic service? You were in Herzoslovakia just before the assassination?" "Yes." "Then I think Madame has a right to hear the story," Lemoine said. "She is indirectly concerned." "Very well," said Battle, "but it's understood that anything said here is in strict confidence. Now, 7 years ago something disappeared. Disappeared in a way that seems incredible, unless you admit two things: that the thief was a royal personage, and that at the same time it was the work of a professional. Monsieur Lemoine here will tell you how that might well be." The Frenchman bowed and took up the tale. "It is possible that you in England may not have heard of our famous King Victor. What his real name is, no one knows. His father is known to have been Irish. He is a man of singular daring who speaks 5 languages and is unequalled in the art of disguise. 8 years ago, he carried out a daring series of robberies in Paris while living under the name of Captain O'Neill." An exclamation escaped Virginia. "Oui, I understand what agitates Madame. You will see in a minute. Now, there was also a clever young actress, Angèle Marie, of the Folle Bergère, whom we suspected was associated with the operations of King Victor, but no proof was forthcoming. At about that time, in addition, Paris was preparing for the visit of the young King Nicholas IV of Herzoslovakia, and we at the Sûreté were warned about the activities of a revolutionary organization calling itself the Comrades of the Red Hand. It is fairly certain now that the comrades approached Angèle Marie, offering her a huge sum if she would aid them. Her part was to infatuate the king, then decoy him to an agreed spot. Well, Angèle accepted the bribe, but was more ambitious than her employers suspected. She conceived the idea of being not a king's mistress, but a queen. She succeeded. The king fell desperately in love with her, and as everyone knows, she became Queen Viraga of Herzoslovakia. But her triumph was not to be long-lived. The comrades, furious at her betrayal, worked up the country to such a pitch that revolution broke out in which both the king and queen perished. Their bodies were horribly mutilated and hardly recognizable when recovered. Now, in all this, it seems certain Queen Viraga kept in with her confederate, King Victor. It is known that she continued to correspond with him in a secret code, and for safety the letters were written in English and signed with the name of an English lady then at the embassy. It was your name she used, Mrs. Revel." "I know," said Virginia. "So that is the truth of the letters." "What a blackguardly trick!" Bill cried indignantly. "The letters were addressed to Captain O'Neill in Paris, and their purpose may have light shed upon it by a matter which came to light after the assassination. It was discovered that the principal stones of the Herzoslovakian crown jewels had been replaced by paste. So, even as a queen, Angèle Marie still practiced her former activities. Alors, 7 years ago, Nicholas and his queen came to England, and were the guests here of the Foreign Secretary, the late Marquis of Caterham. And so we have a royal personage who was at the same time an expert thief. And there is no doubt that the particular substitute could only have been fashioned by King Victor. Indeed, the whole plan, in its audacity, pointed to him as the author. "So what happened?" asked Virginia. "Hushed up," said Battle. "Not a mention's ever been made public to this day. But I can tell you one thing. That jewel didn't leave England. No, Her Majesty hid it somewhere. And I shouldn't wonder if it wasn't somewhere in this room." "What?" Anthony cried. "After all these years?" "You do not know the peculiar circumstances, monsieur," said the Frenchman. "Only a fortnight later, the Revolution broke out. Also, Captain O'Neill was arrested in Paris and sentenced on a minor charge. We hoped to find coded letters in his house, but it appears they'd been stolen by some Herzoslovakian go-between who disappeared completely." "Who probably," said Anthony thoughtfully, "went to Africa, where they probably called him Dutch Pedro." He caught Battle's expressionless glance and smiled. "It's not really clairvoyance. I'll tell you presently." "There's one thing you've not explained," said Virginia. "How does this link up with the memoirs? There must be a link, surely." "Oui, madame, there is. Count Stilptich was also staying at Chimneys at the time." "And he might have known about it?" "Parfaitement. He collected secrets like some men collect rare china. And it is said that before his death he boasted that he intended to make some startling revelations in his memoirs." Battle nodded. "And if he's blurted it all out, the fat will be in the fire." Anthony lit a cigarette. "In Paris, Mr. McGrath rescued Count Stilptich from a band of Apache. And the Count made two rather interesting remarks. One was, he knew where the Kohinoor was. He also said the gang were King Victor's men. Taken together, those two remarks are very significant." "Good Lord," exclaimed Battle. "I should say. Even Prince Michael's murder takes on a different aspect now. Suppose King Victor was surprised when he was searching for the jewel." "Is he in England, then?" asked Anthony sharply. "Didn't you keep track of him when he was released?" "Oh, we tried to, monsieur." The Frenchman smiled ruefully. "But he gave us the slip. We thought he would make straight for England. But no, he went to America." "What?" "Yes. And what do you think he called himself?" "What?" "Prince Nicholas of Herzoslovakia." "Impossible," said Battle. "Not so, my friend. A most colossal bluff. Our friend Victor resurrects Prince Nicholas, who was rumoured to have died in the Congo years ago, and plays him to such purpose that he gets away with a tremendous haul of American dollars on account of supposed oil concessions. But by a mere accident he was unmasked and had to leave the country hurriedly. This time he did come to England, and that is why I am here. I think he was here the night Prince Michael died, and again last night." "But look here," said Bill. "What really did happen last night?" "I'm afraid," said Monsieur Lemoine, "that I gave you rather violent exercise." "It was you I chased?" "Yes. I came here to watch, convinced that the secret had to do with this room since the prince was killed here. I stood on the terrace and became aware of a torch in this room. I slipped inside, but I could not see the man clearly. His back was to me. I watched him take to pieces those two suits of armour. Then he began tapping the wall panelling under that picture. But then you burst in." He looked at Bill. "I had no wish as yet to reveal my identity, so I sprang out through the window." "And I followed you," said Virginia. Bill nodded. "But this other fellow had the sense to stay still and sneak out through the door." "Where he would merely be a rescuer in advance of the rest," said Lemoine. "You really think he's actually among the household?" Bill's eyes sparkled. "Why not?" Lemoine shrugged. Anthony rose and went to the windows. pulling back the curtains. "Daylight," he said. "There won't be any more excitements now." "I will leave you," said Lemoine. "We shall perhaps meet again later." With a graceful bow to Virginia, he stepped out of the window. "Bed," said Virginia, yawning. "Come on, Bill. The breakfast table will see us not, I fear." Anthony stayed at the window, looking after the retreating form of Monsieur Lemoine. "You wouldn't think it," said Battle behind him, "but that's the cleverest detective in France." "You know, I rather think I would." "By the way, sir, you remember that man found near Staines?" "Yes." "They've identified him. Giuseppe Manueli, a waiter at the Blitz Hotel. Curious, isn't it?" Anthony continued to stare out of the window. "Was he shot there, or killed elsewhere, and the body brought to that particular spot?" "I think he was shot somewhere else." "I think so too," said Anthony. "And do you know who brought him there?" "Yes." Anthony nodded. "I did. Do you want to hear the story?" "If you please, Mr. Cade." Both men sat down, and Anthony recounted the events of the preceding Thursday. Battle listened immovably. When Anthony had finished, he said, "You know, sir, you'll get into trouble one of these days." "Then I am not to be taken into custody?" "Not just yet." Battle shook his head. "But what I can't make out is why you decided to come across with this now." "Until tonight I couldn't speak for Mrs. Revell's sake. But now those letters have been definitely proved to have nothing to do with her. At the time, however, her statement of having paid this man money to suppress the letters, simply as a whim, might have taken a bit of believing." "By a jury it might," agreed the superintendent. "But you accepted quite easily." "Well, you see, Mr. Cade, most of my work has lain amongst these people, what they call the upper classes, and I've always found them the same: truthful, fearless, and sometimes extraordinarily foolish." "So what's your theory of Giuseppe's killing?" "I'd say he was a regular thief who was employed by either King Victor or the Red Hand to steal the memoirs, but Giuseppe gets hold of the letters instead. He sees the magazine cutting and has the brilliant idea of blackmailing the lady. The comrades find out, believe he's double-crossing them, and decree his death. What I can't make out, though, is the revolver with Virginia engraved on it. There's too much finesse about that for the comrades. So perhaps King Victor stepped in there. But what his motive was, I don't know. It looks like a deliberate attempt to saddle Mrs. Revell with the murder, and there doesn't seem any particular point in that." "I did have a theory," said Anthony, and he told Battle of Virginia's recognition of Prince Michael. Battle nodded his head. "Oh, there was no doubt as to his identity." "And I suppose King Victor and co. have the letters?" Battle nodded again. "Yes, they've got them all right. And since you say one was headed Chimneys, depend upon it, that was the one with instructions for finding the diamond. And they've decoded it. They now know where to look." "In here?" "Exactly." "And I suppose you've got a plan in that subtle head of yours?" Very slowly, Battle winked. "Want my help?" "I do. And Mrs. Revell's." Battle rose. "Well, not much good going to bed now." Anthony glanced at his watch. "I agree. A dip in the lake and a hearty breakfast would be more to the point." He ran lightly upstairs to his bedroom, and stopped dead. He could not believe his eyes. On the dressing-table was the bundle of letters. They were intact. Not one was missing. At 10 o'clock that morning, Lord Caterham and his daughter were breakfasting. "Father?" Lord Caterham, absorbed in the Times, did not reply. "Father!" "Huh?" "Who's already had breakfast?"
"Oh, What's his name?
Fat Ikey?
That's it.
Lord Caterham put down the paper.
The superintendent said everyone who wanted to could clear out.
That's what you've been wanting.
Yes. Then he said that nevertheless he wanted me to ask everyone to stay on.
What did you say?
Oh, I agreed, of course.
And who've you asked so far?
Cade. He was up early. I like him. And Isaacstein, but he's got to go back to town. Don't forget to order the car for the 10:50, by the way.
All right.
Now, if I can only get rid of Fish, too.
I thought you liked talking to him about your mouldy old books.
So I did. But it gets monotonous always doing all the talking. Fish never volunteers any statements of his own.
Good morning, Lord Caterham.
Oh, yes, good morning. Nice day.
Hiram Fish had made his usual noiseless entry. Do I hear correctly that we are free to depart?
Yes. However, I'd be delighted if you will stay on for a little, although I wouldn't blame you for wanting to run away. It's been a beastly visit, I know.
Why, Lord Caterham, I'll be only too delighted to accept your very kind invitation.
Oh, well, that's that. Lord Caterham murmured something about having to see his bailiff, and escaped from the room.
Oh, I feel so frightfully sleepy this morning, said Virginia, and yawned. She was sitting in a long wicker chair on the lawn. At her feet, on the grass, sat Bill Eversley. "Blast!" he said suddenly. "Here's that French idiot bearing down on us." It was indeed Monsieur Lemoine, black-bearded and correct of demeanour as ever. "Good morning, madame. Mr. Eversley. You are not fatigued, I trust?" "Oh, no, not in the least," said Virginia. "Excellent. How would it be if we promenaded ourselves a little, the three of us?" "Bill?" "Oh, all right." The young gentleman heaved himself up, and the three of them walked slowly along together. Presently, Lemoine was telling them anecdotes of the famous King Victor. He talked well, albeit with a certain bitterness, as he described the various ways in which the Detective Bureau had been outwitted. But all the time, Virginia had a feeling he had some other object in view. Suddenly he broke off his story and looked round. A vehicle was approaching along the drive from the direction of the house. "It's the luggage cart," Virginia said, "taking Isaacstein's luggage and valet to the station." "Is that so?" Lemoine glanced at his watch. "A thousand pardons, such charming company, but I have been longer here than I meant. Is it possible, you think, to have a lift to the village?" He stepped out onto the drive, and the cart stopped. After a word or two, Lemoine climbed in behind and drove off. The other two watched with puzzled expressions, and just as the cart swung round behind a clump of trees, a suitcase fell off. "Come on," said Virginia. "That suitcase was thrown out." They ran towards the fallen piece of luggage, and as they reached it, Lemoine came round the bend, walking fast. "I was obliged to descend," he said. "I found I had left something behind." "This?" Bill indicated the handsome case of heavy pigskin. "What a pity," said Lemoine. "It must have fallen out." He picked up the case and carried it to the trees. Something flashed in his hand, and the lock slipped back. When he spoke, his voice was quick and commanding. "Is the car in sight?" Virginia looked towards the house. "No." "Good." Deftly he tossed things out of the suitcase. Gold-top bottle, silk pyjamas, socks. Suddenly his figure stiffened. He rapidly unrolled a bundle of silk underwear. In its centre was a heavy revolver. "I hear the horn," said Virginia. Like lightning, Lemoine repacked the suitcase, but the revolver he slipped into his pocket. He snapped the locks of the suitcase and turned to Bill. "Take it, monsieur. Stop the car and explain that it fell off the luggage cart. Do not mention me." Bill stepped onto the drive as the big Lanchester limousine with Isaacstein inside it came round the corner. The chauffeur slowed down, and Bill swung the suitcase up to him. "Fell off the luggage cart," he caught a momentary glimpse of the financier's startled yellow face staring at him. Then the car swept on. Bill went back to Lemoine, who was standing with the revolver in his hand, and a look of satisfaction on his face.
"A long shot," he said, "but it came off."
Superintendent Battle was standing in the library at Wyvern Abbey. A frowning George Lomax was seated at his desk. In front of him was the packet of letters. "I can't understand it at all," he said irritably. "They're in code, you say?" "Just so, sir." "And he found them on his dressing table?" Battle repeated Anthony Cade's account of how he'd come to regain possession of the letters. "Sounds very fishy to me, very fishy," George grunted. "Now, about those letters. They must be decoded without delay. There's a man at the British Museum knows about ciphers."
"Professor Winwood,"
said Battle. "Exactly. He must be wired to immediately," George commanded.
"I did so, sir, an hour ago. He's arriving by the 12:10.
"Oh, good, very good. Now tell me, do you have any theory as to how these letters came to be restored to Mr. Cade?"
"It's my opinion, sir, that if people can't get a thing one way, they try another."
"I don't follow," said George.
"This King Victor is well aware by now that the council chamber is being watched, so he lets us have the letters, lets us do the decoding and find the hiding place. And then trouble. But Lemoine and I will attend to that."
"You've got a plan, eh?"
"Let's say I've got an idea, sir."
"Well, do your best, Battle, do your best. You can get along without me, I suppose?"
"I think so, sir."
"Good. Oh, and send Eversley over when you get back, will you?" On his way back to Chimneys, Battle passed Anthony on the road and stopped. "Ah, good," said Anthony, getting in. "A lift."
"Where have you been, Mr. Cade?"
"The station, to inquire about trains."
"Thinking about leaving us again?"
"Not just at present." Suddenly Battle leaned forward and touched the chauffeur on the shoulder.
"Stop, will you? Wait here."
He jumped out of the car, and Anthony perceived Monsieur Lemoine advancing to meet the English detective. There was a rapid colloquy between them, and then the superintendent returned to the car.
"Lemoine's found the murder weapon, the revolver, in Isaac Stein's suitcase."
Anthony found Virginia walking under the trees at Chimneys. "Have you heard about the revolver?" she asked breathlessly. "Yes. Staggering, isn't it? Isaac Stein's the one person I'd have thought was above suspicion. Can you see any motive for his wanting Prince Michael out of the way?" "No. It certainly doesn't fit." "Nothing fits anywhere." Anthony spoke discontentedly. "To begin with, I rather fancied myself as an amateur detective, but so far all I've done is clear the governess at vast trouble and some little expense." "That's what you went to France for?" "Yes, to Dinard. Mademoiselle Brune, it seems, had been the mainstay of the de Breteuil household for years. So, unless the Comtesse is also a crook, one theory of mine falls to the ground." "Well, Madame de Breteuil is quite above suspicion," said Virginia. "I know her well, and I fancy I've come across Mademoiselle Brune at the chateau too. I certainly knew her face. In that vague way one does know governesses. I never really look at them properly. Do you?" "Only if they're exceptionally beautiful." "What's the matter?" Anthony was staring at a figure which detached itself from a clump of trees and stood there rigidly at attention. It was the Herzoslovakian, Boris. "Excuse me," Anthony said. "I must speak to my dog a minute." He went across to where Boris was standing. "What do you want?" Boris bowed. "I bring this to the master." He produced a soiled scrap of paper, torn evidently from a letter, and handed it to Anthony. There was an address scrawled on it, nothing else. "What's this?" "He dropped it." "Who?" "The foreign gentleman." "Well, go away now, I'm busy." Anthony rejoined Virginia, thrusting the paper into his pocket. What did he want? Virginia asked. And why do you call him your dog? Because he acts like one, always following me around. He must have been a retriever in his last incarnation. He's brought me a piece of a letter dropped by the foreign gentleman. Lemoine, I suppose. I suppose so, acquiesced Virginia. Or Isaacstein. He looks foreign enough, heaven knows. Isaacstein. Where the devil does he come in? They strolled on for a minute or two in silence. Are you sorry you ever mixed yourself up in all this? Virginia asked suddenly. Good Lord, no. I love it. I've spent most of my life looking for trouble, you know. And taken a good many risks? Pretty nearly every one there is. Except marriage. That's cynical. It wasn't meant to be. Marriage, the kind of marriage I mean, would be the biggest adventure of the lot. In fact, to get the woman I'd want, I'd even take up regular work. Virginia laughed. I was brought up to a trade, you know, Anthony continued. But you abandoned it? Yes. Why? Principle. Oh. Anthony looked at her. You know, you're a very unusual woman. Why? You can refrain from asking questions. You mean I haven't asked you what your trade was? Just that. They walked on again in silence. They were nearing the house now, passing close by the scented sweetness of the rose garden. I dare say, said Anthony, breaking the silence, that you know when a man's in love with you. And I don't suppose you care a hang for me or anyone else. But by God, I'd like to make you care. Do you think you could? Probably not. I suppose you'll marry someone respectable and prosperous, and I'll return to my disreputable life. But I'll kiss you once before I go. I swear I will. Well, you can't do it now, Virginia said softly. The superintendent's watching us out of the library window. Anthony waved a hand airily to Battle, who, with a surprising agility in so stolid a man, vaulted out of the window and joined them on the terrace. I've got Professor Winwood here, he said. He's decoding the letters now. He led them to the window, through which, seated at a table, the letters spread in front of him, they could see a small, red-haired man of middle age. He grunted irritably as he wrote busily. Presently he looked up. Call this thing a cipher, Battle? A child in arms could do this tomfoolery. We're not all so clever as you are, Professor, said Battle mildly. Doesn't need cleverness. It's routine. The Professor rose and seized his overcoat. Here you are. I've done the one dated Chimneys you said was important, but I'll take the rest back to London. Hand them to my assistant. I've come away from a real teaser. I want to get back to it. Very well, Professor. But Lord Caterham is expecting you for lunch, I believe. No, bad habit lunch. A banana and a water biscuit is all any sane man needs. Good day to you. He's always in the very deuce of a hurry, said Battle, after the Professor had departed. Clever man, though. Well, here's Her Majesty's letter. Care to look? It had been, Anthony remembered, a long epistle, breathing passion and despair. The Professor had transformed it into a businesslike communication. Operation successful, but S double-crossed us. Has removed stone from hiding place. Not in his room, but have found following memorandum, which I think refers to it. Richmond 7, straight 8, left 3, right. S, said Anthony. Stilptich, of course. The cunning old dog changed the diamond's hiding place. And Richmond, said Virginia thoughtfully. I know. The Holbein portrait in the council chamber. It's a portrait of the Earl of Richmond. They were tapping on the wall below it. You've got it, said Battle. The picture's the starting point. But the crooks didn't know what the figures refer to. Their first idea was that the diamond was hidden in the armour that stands underneath the picture.
That failed, so their next idea was a secret passage. Do you know of any such thing here, Mrs. Revel?
Well, I know of at least one, and there's a priest's hole. But here's Bundle, she'll know better. Bundle was coming along the terrace towards them. I'm taking the Panhard up to town after lunch if anyone wants a lift, she said. Bundle, dear, said Virginia, is there any secret passage leading out of the council chamber? Rather. In the old days it led to Wyvern Abbey, but it's all blocked up now. The one in the White Gallery is much more amusing. Maybe. But how do you get into the council chamber one? Hinged panel. I'll show you after lunch if you like.
Thank you, said Superintendent Battle. Shall we say 2:30?
At 2:30, a little party met in the council chamber. Battle, Monsieur Lemoine, Bundle, Virginia and Anthony Cade. Lord Caterham's daughter went to the Holbein portrait, touched a spring concealed at the side of it, and with a creaking noise, a section of the panelling swung inwards. Since both Lemoine and Battle were provided with torches, they entered the dark aperture first, with the others close on their heels. The floor was rough, and as Bundle had said, the passage extended for a bare 100 yards before it came to an abrupt end with a fallen heap of masonry.
"We'll go back, if you please," said Battle.
When they were back again at the entrance, he said,
"Very well, we'll start from here. 7 straight."
He paced 7 steps carefully and examined the ground.
"Right. Now then, 8 left. Well, that's not paces. The passage is only wide enough to go Indian file."
"Say it in bricks," Anthony suggested.
"Quite right, Mr. Cade. Well, let's try 8 bricks from the bottom on the left-hand side. Now 3 to the right. Hello? What's this?"
Battle worked at a brick with the point of his knife, and after a minute or two's work he was able to pull it right out. Behind was a small cavity. Battle thrust in his hand. Everyone waited breathlessly. Battle drew out his hand again and uttered an exclamation of anger. The others stared uncomprehendingly at the 3 articles he held: a card of pearl buttons, a square of coarse knitting, and a piece of paper on which were inscribed a row of capital E's.
"Well, I'm danged," said Battle.
"Mon Dieu!" muttered the Frenchman. "But what does it mean?" said Virginia, bewildered. "It means," said Anthony, "the late Count Stilptich had a sense of humour. He must have suspected his memorandum had been read. So when the crooks came to recover the jewel, they were to find instead this conundrum."
"You think it has a meaning, then?"
said Battle. "Undoubtedly," said Anthony. "If the Count had meant to be merely offensive, he'd have put a placard with 'Sold' on it, or a picture of a donkey or something."
A bit of knitting, some capital E's, and a lot of buttons,"
Battle muttered.
"Milady,"
the Frenchman spoke to Bundle.
"When was this passage last used?"
"Oh, I don't believe anyone's been in for over 2 years. The priest's hole is the show exhibit."
"Curious," Lemoine murmured.
He stooped and picked up a small object from the floor.
"This match has not lain here for 2 years."
He paused and looked at them.
"No, nor even for 2 days."
The panel had swung to when they first entered the secret passage. Now Bundle unlatched it from the inside, and it swung noiselessly open again.
"Damn it,"
said Lord Caterham, springing up from an armchair.
"There's no single room where I can be sure of a little peace."
"Poor father," said Bundle. "Did we startle you?"
"Good Lord! How many of you are there? There seems to be a positive boom in secret passages today. I had to show that fellow Fish round them all this morning." "When was this?" asked Battle quickly. "Just before lunch. It seems he'd heard of the one in here, so I showed him that, and then took him up to the White Gallery and to the priest's hole. He looked bored to death."
Anthony put a hand on Lemoine's arm. "Come outside," he said softly. "I want to speak to you." The two men went out together. Anthony drew from his pocket the scrap of paper Boris had given him. "Did you drop this?" he asked. Lemoine examined it.
"Erstmere, Langley Road, Dover," he read. "No, I did not drop it. Why?"
Anthony repeated what Boris had said.
"You say you found this in the trees?" asked Lemoine.
"Well, I assume so. He didn't actually say so."
"It might have fluttered out of Mr. Isaacstein's suitcase. Question him again."
Lemoine handed the paper back. Superintendent Battle was standing near the French window, in a wooden attitude. "You look very pensive," Anthony said, when he joined the superintendent.
"I've got a lot to think about, Mr. Cade."
"Yes, I expect you have."
"Tell me, Mr. Cade, got any enemies here that you know of?"
"Why?" Battle took a folded sheet of cheap notepaper from his pocket and handed it to Anthony. Scrawled on it, in an illiterate handwriting, were the words, "Look out for Mr. Cade. He isn't what he seems." Anthony handed it back with a laugh. "That all? Cheer up, Battle. Don't you know I'm really a king in disguise?" Anthony went into the house, whistling lightly. But as he entered his bedroom and shut the door, his face grew stern. He went over to the window and stood looking irritably out. Then his eyes suddenly focused on a certain spot. "Of course," he said. "That's it. The rose garden." He hurried downstairs again, entered the rose garden by the little gate, and walked toward the sundial at the centre. Then he stopped dead. "I didn't know you were interested in roses, Mr. Fish." "Oh, considerably, sir." They looked at each other warily. "So am I." "Is that so?" "In fact, I dote upon roses," Anthony said airily. A slight smile hovered upon Fish's lips. "Red roses, Mr. Cade. Now, a bright scarlet rose—" But here Fish was interrupted by Bundle, who was leaning out of a first-floor window. "Care for a spin up to town, Mr. Fish? I'm just off." "Thank you, Lady Eileen, but I'm very happy here." "Mr. Cade?" Anthony shook his head, and Bundle disappeared. "No, I think a good after-luncheon nap is more my line," said Anthony, with a yawn. He took out a cigarette. "You got a match?" Fish handed him a box, and Anthony helped himself as a thundering noise sounded from outside the house. "Pretty powerful engine she's got in that car of hers," said Anthony, before yawning again and strolling towards the house. But once inside the door he raced across the hall, out on the farther side and across the park. Bundle, he knew, had to make a big detour by the lodge gates and through the village. It was a race against time. He ran desperately, reached the park wall, swung himself up and dropped into the road. "Hi!" he cried. Bundle swerved, but managed to pull up without accident. Anthony opened the car door and jumped in. "I'm coming to London with you." "What an extraordinary person you are," said Bundle. "What's that in your hand?" "Oh, only a match." Anthony regarded it thoughtfully. It was pink, with a yellow head, and he put it carefully into his pocket. "Some people are terrified of my driving," said Bundle, as she swept round a corner on two wheels. "Father, for instance. Nothing will induce him to come out with me in this old bus, but you don't seem a bit nervous." Privately, Anthony thought Lord Caterham was entirely justified, but he said, "Actually, I'm rather in a hurry myself." "Oh, shall I speed up a bit?" "Good Lord, no," said Anthony hastily. "We're doing fine." "Ah, well, here are the trams," said Bundle, after an hour or so. "Now I suppose I'll have to drive carefully." "It might be as well," Anthony agreed. Their ideas on the subject of careful driving hardly coincided, but at last they had left the indignant suburbs behind them and reached Oxford Street. Where do you want to be dropped? Where are you going? Knightsbridge. All right, drop me at Hyde Park Corner. From there, Anthony took a taxi to Victoria, where impatiently he had to wait an hour for the next train to Dover. On arriving there, he asked to be directed to Langley Road. The road in question was a long one, and Hurstmere was the last house. It stood well back in ragged and overgrown grounds. A good spot to choose, Anthony thought. He glanced quickly up and down the road, slipped quietly past the creaking rusty iron gate, and went up the drive. Presently, as the drive curved, he slipped into the shrubbery and continued unseen toward the house. Suddenly he stood still. His hearing had not been mistaken. A man came round the corner of the house, a short, thick-set man, foreign in appearance. He walked steadily, circling the house, and disappearing again. Sentry, Anthony thought. As soon as he'd passed, Anthony went on noiselessly. The wall of the house was on his right, and he came to where a broad blur of light fell onto the gravelled walk. The sound of several men talking was clearly audible. Anthony stole up to the open window and carefully looked in. Half a dozen men were sprawled round a table. 4 were big and thick-set, with eyes set in Magyar slanting fashion. The other 2 were rat-like little men with quick gestures. The language being spoken was French. "When will the boss be here?" growled one of the big men. One of the small men shrugged. "Any time now." "About time, too. What glorious work might we not have accomplished in these days of idle waiting?" "Fool! Getting nabbed by the police is all you would have accomplished. Blundering gorillas." "Aha!" roared another big, thick-set fellow. "You insult the comrades! I will set the sign of the red hand round your throat." He half rose, glaring ferociously at the little Frenchman, but one of his companions pulled him back. "No quarrelling! We're to work together. King Victor doesn't stand for being disobeyed." In the darkness, Anthony moved away. "God, what a lot," he muttered. From somewhere above his head came a stifled groan. Anthony looked up. The groan came again. Quickly he grasped some heavy Virginia creeper and climbed nimbly till he reached the sill of a window. He opened it, sprang lightly inside the room, and flashed on his pocket torch. In the far corner was a bed. On it a man was lying. His face was foreign, pale and emaciated, and the head was swathed in heavy bandages. And he was bound hand and foot. Anthony crossed to the bed and bent over the man, but as he did so he heard a sound behind him. "Hands up, sonny! You didn't expect to see me here, but I caught the same train as you." It was Hiram Fish standing in the doorway. He was smiling, and in his hand was a big blue automatic. It was Tuesday evening. Lord Caterham, Virginia, and Bundle were sitting in the library after dinner. Some 30 hours had elapsed since Anthony's departure. "He didn't tell you where he was going?" Bundle said. "No," said Virginia. "He told me nothing." "Well, he's left all his things here." After this there was a silence. Lord Caterham was the first to break it. "Well, I'm quite willing to admit," he said, "that it's been an almost ideal 24 hours. Peace, perfect peace. No burglaries, no crimes of violence, no detectives, no Americans. Only I'd have enjoyed it so much more if all the time I hadn't been saying to myself, one or the other of them is bound to turn up in a minute. That spoilt the whole thing." "Well, nobody has turned up," said Bundle. "We've been left severely alone. And it's odd the way Fish disappeared, too. Didn't he say anything?" "Not a word," said Lord Caterham. "Last time I saw him was yesterday afternoon. He was pacing up and down the rose garden, smoking one of those unpleasant cigars of his. In a day or two I expect we'll have Scotland Yard dragging the lake to find his body." Lord Caterham continued gloomily, "Serves me right. I ought not to have allowed myself to be drawn into George Lomax's wildcat schemes." At that moment Treadwell entered. "Well, what is it?" "The French detective is here, my lord.
Am I to say that you will see him?" "Knew it was too good to last," complained Lord Caterham. "Yes, bring him in." The Frenchman came in with a quick, light step. He was excited about something. "Good evening," said Lord Caterham. "Have a drink."
"I think you know." Lemoine took a chair. "At last I make progress. I feel you should be acquainted with the very grave discoveries I have made in the last 24 hours. My lord, yesterday one of your guests left his house in a curious manner. I have had, I must tell you, my suspicions from the beginning. 2 months ago this man was in South Africa. But before that, where?" Virginia drew a sharp breath. The Frenchman continued, "Where? None can say. And he is just such a one as the man I'm looking for. Audacious, reckless. I send cable after cable, but no words can I get as to his past life. So, my suspicions grow stronger. Then, I pick up one day a scrap of paper where he has lately passed along. It bears the address of a house in Dover. Later, as though by chance, I drop that same piece of paper, and I see this Boris pick it up and take it to his master, to Anthony Cade. All along I have been sure this Boris is of the Red Hand, and we know the comrades are working with King Victor in this affair. However, almost I am disarmed, for Cade asks me if I have dropped this same paper. As I say, almost I am disarmed, but not quite. It may mean he is innocent, or it may mean that he is very, very clever. I deny, of course, that the paper is mine, but since then I have set inquiries on foot. Until yesterday, the house at Dover was occupied by foreigners. No doubt but that it was King Victor's headquarters. And today I have news it has been abandoned. You see the significance? Yesterday, Cade clears out from here. Ever since he dropped that paper, he knows that the game is up. He reaches Dover, and immediately the gang is disbanded. What the next move will be, I do not know, but knowing King Victor as I do, I am certain he will not abandon the game without having one more try for the jewel. And that is where I shall get him." Virginia stood up. "But you are leaving one thing out of the account, I think, Monsieur Lemoine," she said, her voice cold as steel. "Mr. Cade is not the only guest who disappeared yesterday. What about Mr. Fish?" "Mr. Fish?" "Yes. Did you not tell us that King Victor had lately come to England from America? So was Mr. Fish. And he is certainly not what he pretends to be. Lord Caterham has commented on the fact that he is supposed to have come here to see first editions, but he is always the listener, never the talker. And there was a light in his window the night of the murder. Then take that evening in the council chamber. When I met him on the terrace, he was fully dressed. He could easily have dropped the paper. You didn't actually see Mr. Cade do so? I say there is far more suspicion attaching to Mr. Fish's actions than to Mr. Cade's." "Madame, from your point of view that may well be, and I agree that Mr. Fish is not what he seems." "Well then?" "But it makes no difference. You see, madame, Mr. Fish is a Pinkerton's man." "What?" cried Lord Caterham. "A private detective?" "Yes, my lord. He came here to trail King Victor. Superintendent Battle and I have known this for some time." Virginia said nothing. Instead, very slowly she sat down again. "You see," Lemoine continued, "we have all known that eventually King Victor would come to Chimneys. It was the one place we were sure of catching him." "You've not caught him yet," said Virginia. "No, but I shall." "Do you pretend that it was Mr. Cade who shot Prince Michael?" "Certainly." "Oh, no. Oh, no." Virginia shook her head. "That is one thing I am quite sure of. Anthony Cade never killed Prince Michael." Lemoine was watching her intently. "It may have been the Herzoslovakian, Boris, who actually fired that shot. Who knows? Prince Michael may have done him some great wrong, and the man sought revenge." "He does look a murderous sort of fellow," agreed Lord Caterham. "The housemaids, I believe, scream when he passes them." Lemoine rose. "Well, now I must be going. I felt it was due to you, my lord, to let you know how things stand." "I hate that little man with his prim black beard and his eyeglasses," said Bundle, when the door had shut behind Lemoine. "What do you think about it all, Virginia?" "I don't know. I'm tired. I shall go up to bed."
"Not a bad idea," said Lord Caterham. "It's 11:30.
As Virginia was crossing the hall, she caught sight of a familiar broad back. "Superintendent," she called.
"Yes, Mrs. Revel."
"Monsieur Lemoine has been here. He says Mr. Fish is an American detective."
"That's right."
"You've known it all along?"
"Yes."
"I see." Virginia turned away towards the staircase. "Thank you." Sitting before her dressing-table in her room, she faced the question squarely. Was this the trade Anthony had spoken of? The trade that he'd given up? But then she lifted her head with a start. An unusual sound had disturbed her meditations. The sound was repeated. A sharp tap on the window-pane. Virginia went to the window and opened it. On the pathway below was a tall figure. She recognized the massive outline of Boris. And it did not strike her as strange that he should be throwing gravel at her window at this hour of the night. "Yes," she said quietly. "What is it?"
"The master has sent for you," he whispered. "I am to bring you to him."
"Sent for me?"
"Yes. There is a note. I will throw it."
Virginia stood back, and a slip of paper weighted with a stone fell at her feet. She unfolded it and read, "My dear, I'm in a tight place, but I mean to win through. Will you trust me and come to me?" Virginia leaned out of the window again. "What am I to do?"
"Come out through the side door. I will be there. I have a car waiting in the road."
Virginia nodded. Then, smiling, she wrote a short note, addressed it to Bundle, and pinned it to her pillow. At 10 o'clock on the morning of Wednesday the 13th of October, Anthony Cade walked into Harridge's Hotel and asked to be taken to the suite of Baron Lolopretzel. The Baron was standing on the hearthrug in a stiff fashion. Little Captain Andrassy was also present. "Forgive this early call," said Anthony cheerfully, laying down his hat and stick on the table, "but I have a little business proposition to make to you."
"Ah, is that so?"
"Yes, and I won't beat about the bush. Your ship, by which I mean the Loyalist party of Herzoslovakia, lacks a figurehead. At present you are minus a prince. Now supposing I could supply you with one." The Baron stared.
"I do not comprehend you."
"It's all perfectly fair and square. No prince is supplied unless genuine. I'm offering you the real article."
"Not in the least,"
the Baron declared again.
"Do I comprehend you?"
"Doesn't matter. I just want you to get used to the idea. To put it vulgarly, I've got something up my sleeve. You want a prince. Under certain circumstances, I will undertake to supply one." Anthony took up his hat and stick again. "Think it over, Baron, and come down to Chimneys this evening. Several curious things are likely to happen. Shall we say 9 o'clock in the council chamber?" "Thank you, gentlemen." And bowing to both men, Anthony left the room. His next call was in the city, where he was received by a pale and exquisitely dressed underling. "You want to see Mr. Isaacstein? I'm afraid he's most awfully busy this morning." "Just tell him it's important, and that I must see him personally." 2 minutes later, Anthony was conducted into a sumptuous inner sanctum, where Isaacstein rose to greet him. "I'm not going to waste your time," said Anthony. "I've a little business matter I want to put before you. It's about this Herzoslovakian business. Wonderful thing, oil." Isaacstein looked at him out of his beady black eyes.
"Ah."
"But Prince Michael's murder rather upset the apple cart."
"Do you mind coming to the point, Mr. Cade? What's the proposition?"
"A suitable pro-British claimant to the throne."
"Where have you got him?"
"That's my business."
"The genuine article?"
"Absolutely."
"What terms do you want?"
The same loan, on the same conditions, you offered Prince Michael.
What about yourself?
For the moment, nothing. Except I want you to come to Chimneys tonight.
I can't do that,
said Isaacstein. Why?
An important dinner.
Do you know, said Anthony slowly, that they found the revolver Prince Michael was shot with? In your suitcase.
What? What are you saying?
Obligingly, Anthony narrated the circumstances of the finding of the revolver. As he spoke, the other's face assumed a greyish tinge.
But it's false. I never put it there. It's a plot.
Now, don't excite yourself, Anthony said soothingly. If that's the case, you'll easily prove it.
Prove it? How?
Come to Chimneys tonight. The clock in the council chamber struck 9.
"Oh, well,"
said Lord Caterham with a deep sigh.
"Here they all are, back again, wagging their tails behind them."
He looked sadly round the room.
"Organ grinder, complete with monkey," he murmured, looking at the Baron. "I tell you, Bundle, as soon as I can I shall let Chimneys to an enterprising American and go and live in an hotel."
"Cheer up," said Bundle. "At least we seem to have lost Mr. Fish for good." The door opened, and Treadwell announced,
"Mr. George Lomax and Mr. Eversley."
"Enter Codders, followed by Faithful Dog," murmured Bundle.
"My dear Caterham," said George, "I got your message. Delighted to see you, my dear fellow. Not that it was my message, but it doesn't matter."
In the meantime, Bill had made a beeline for Bundle. "I say," he said in an undertone, "what's this I hear about Virginia bolting in the middle of the night? She's not been kidnapped, has she?" "Oh, no. She left a note." "She's not gone off with that colonial, Johnny. I never liked the fellow, and from all I hear there's an idea floating around that he himself is the super crook. But I don't quite see that." "Why not?" demanded Bundle. "Well, this King Victor's a French fellow, and Cade's English enough." "Ah, but haven't you heard that King Victor's an accomplished linguist, and moreover half Irish?" "Oh, Lord! And that's why he's made himself scarce, is it?" "I don't know about that," said Bundle. "I got a wire from him saying he'd be here at 9. "He'll never show up." "You don't think so?" "No fear." "Run his head into the lion's mouth?" "Why, the room's bristling with detectives. One French one by window, one English ditto by fireplace." "You think that would deter King Victor? By all accounts, it's the kind of situation he revels in." The door opened again, and Treadwell announced,
"Mr. Cade."
"Lord Caterham," said Anthony. "I'm giving you a frightful lot of trouble, and I'm awfully sorry. But I really do think that tonight will see the clearing up of the mystery. Now, we're all here, I see."
"This is all very irregular," said George Lomax weightily. "Mr. Cade has no standing whatever."
Anthony ignored him. "It's just a little idea of mine," he continued. "You probably all know that we got hold of a certain message in cipher the other day. There was a reference to Richmond and some numbers." He paused. "Well, in Count Stilptich's memoirs, which I've read, there's a reference to a certain dinner, a flower dinner, at which everyone attending wore a badge representing a flower. The Count himself wore the exact duplicate of the curious device we found in the secret cavity. It represented a rose. It was, if you remember, rows of things. Buttons, letter E's, and finally rows of knitting. Now, what is there in this house that's arranged in rows? Books. And in Lord Caterham's library there is a life of the Earl of Richmond. I think, therefore, you're getting a fair idea of the hiding place. Starting at the volume in question, and using the numbers to denote shelves and books, I think you'll find that the object of our search is concealed in a dummy book."
"My word, that's very ingenious," said Lord Caterham. "Quite ingenious," admitted George. "But it remains to be seen."
Anthony laughed. The proof of the pudding is in the eating, eh? Well, I'll settle it for you. I'll go to the library. But he got no further. Monsieur Lemoine moved forward from the window. Just one moment, Mr. Cade. He went to the writing-table hurriedly, scribbled a few lines, then rang the bell. When Treadwell appeared, Lemoine handed him the note. See that this is delivered at once, if you please.
Very good, sir.
What's the big idea, Lemoine? Anthony asked gently.
If, monsieur, the jewel is where you say it is, it has been there over 7 years. A quarter of an hour more does not matter. And at this juncture it is unwise to permit anyone to leave the room, especially if that person has rather questionable antecedents.
Anthony lit a cigarette. I suppose a vagabond life is not very respectable, he agreed.
Mr. Cade, 2 months ago you were in South Africa. Where were you before that?
Canada.
Are you sure you were not in a French prison?
Anthony laughed. Oh, my poor Lemoine, this is a monomania with you. You see King Victor everywhere. Do you fancy I'm that gentleman? The accusation is too ridiculous.
You think so?
The Frenchman's face was twitching painfully. If I were you, Lemoine, continued Anthony, smoking calmly, I should be very, very careful. There's such a thing as evidence, you know.
Lemoine smiled. You saw that note I wrote just now? It was to my people at the inn. Yesterday I received from France the fingerprints of King Victor, the so-called Captain O'Neill. I have asked for them to be sent here to me. In a few minutes we shall know whether you are the man.
Anthony stared at him, then stubbed out his cigarette. Clever, Lemoine. I never thought of that. The documents will arrive. You'll induce me to dip my fingers in ink, or something equally unpleasant. And if they agree, what then?
What then? Then I shall have proved that you are King Victor,
Lemoine proclaimed triumphantly. Which will doubtless be a great satisfaction to you. But I don't quite see where it's going to hurt me, pursued Anthony. Supposing, for the sake of argument, that I were King Victor, what have you got against me? I've served my sentence. I suppose you could arrest me for the French equivalent of loitering with intent to commit a felony, but that would be poor satisfaction, wouldn't it?
Ah, but you forget. America. Obtaining money under false pretenses, passing yourself off as Prince Nicholas Obolovich.
No good, Lemoine. I was nowhere near America at the time. That I can prove. If Victor impersonated Prince Nicholas in America, then I'm not King Victor. But are you sure he was impersonated? Or was it the man himself?
Oh, the man was an impostor, all right, interposed Battle.
Well, I wouldn't contradict you, Superintendent, but are you equally sure Prince Nicholas died in the Congo?
No, sir, I couldn't swear to that, but it's generally believed.
Indeed. Well, to come to the point, I'm afraid Lemoine's going to be disappointed. You see, I believe in having something up one's sleeve, and anticipating some little unpleasantness might arise tonight, I took the precaution to bring a trump card along with me. It, or rather he, is upstairs.
Upstairs?
Said Lord Caterham, interested. Yes. Poor fellow, he's been having rather a trying time of it lately. Got a nasty bump on the head.
Oh, this foolery, said Lemoine with sudden ferocity. You think to outwit me yet again? And it may be true you were not in America, but there is something else. The murder of Prince Michael. He interrupted you that night as you were looking for the jewel.
Lemoine, have you ever known King Victor commit murder? You know as well, better than I, that he has never shed blood.
Then who else could have murdered him? Tell me that,
cried Lemoine. Suddenly a soft whistle sounded from the terrace outside, and Anthony sprang to the window, all nonchalance laid aside. Ah, that was the signal I've been waiting for. You ask me who murdered Prince Michael. I'll show you. The murderer is in the library now. With the others following him, he led the way round the terrace until they came to the library window. It yielded to his touch, and very softly he held aside the thick curtain, so they could look into the room. Standing by the bookcase was a dark figure carrying an electric torch and hurriedly pulling out volumes. And then, as they stood watching, someone sprang past them with a sound like the roar of a wild beast. The torch fell to the ground and the sounds of a struggle filled the room. Lord Caterham groped his way to the lights and switched them on. Two figures were swaying together. There was a short, sharp crack of a pistol shot, and the smaller figure crumpled and fell. The other turned to face them. It was Boris, his eyes alight with rage.
"She killed my master," he growled, "and now she tries to shoot me. I would have taken the pistol from her and shot her, but it went off in the struggle. Now the evil woman is dead."
"A woman?" Lomax cried. They drew nearer, and on the floor, the pistol still clasped in her hand, and an expression of deadly malignity on her face, lay Mademoiselle Brune. "I suspected her from the first," explained Anthony. "There was a light in her room on the night of the murder, but after I came back from Brittany I wavered. Satisfied she was what she represented herself to be, it never occurred to me that the real Mademoiselle Brune might have been kidnapped on her way to her new post, and a substitute taken her place. Instead, I shifted my suspicions to Mr. Fish. It was not until he followed me to Dover, and we had a mutual explanation, that I began to see things clearly. Once I knew he was a Pinkerton's man, trailing King Victor, my suspicions swung back again to their original object. The thing that worried me was that Mrs. Revel had definitely recognized the woman. But Superintendent Battle will tell you that a plot was formed to keep Mrs. Revel from coming to Chimneys. A dead body, in fact. And though the murder was the work of the Red Hand, the staging of it pointed to some abler intelligence directing operations. From the first, I'd suspected some connection with Herzoslovakia, since Mrs. Revel was the only member of the house party who'd been to the country. Then, when I realized the possibility of Mademoiselle Brune's being an impostor, added to the fact that her face was familiar to Mrs. Revel, I began to see daylight. It was evidently very important that she should not be recognized.
"But who was she?"
said Lord Caterham.
"Someone Mrs. Revel had known in Herzoslovakia?"
"Well, I think the Baron might be able to tell us."
"Aye?"
The Baron stared down at the motionless figure. "Look well," said Anthony. "Don't be put off by the make-up. She was an actress once. Remember?"
"God in heaven,"
the Baron breathed.
"It is not possible. She was killed. They were both killed. On the steps of the palace. Her body was recovered."
"Mutilated and unrecognizable," Anthony reminded him. "I think she escaped and has spent years lying low. Then King Victor was released, and they planned to recover the diamond together. She was searching for it that night when suddenly she came upon Prince Michael, and he recognized her. There hadn't been much fear of her meeting him in the ordinary way of things, since royal guests don't come in contact with governesses, and she could always retire with a convenient migraine, as she did the day the Baron was here. However, she met Prince Michael when she least expected it, and with exposure staring her in the face, she shot him. It was she who placed the revolver in Isaacstein's suitcase to confuse the trail, and she who returned the letters. Lemoine moved forward.
"I do not care about this. The murder of Prince Michael, that is not my affair. I want King Victor."
Anthony sighed. "Still at it, Lemoine? How persistent you are. I'm sorry for you. You're a very able fellow, really. But you're going to lose the trick." He stepped across the room and rang the bell. Treadwell answered it. "A gentleman arrived with me this evening, Treadwell. Will you kindly ask him to join us?"
"Yes, sir."
Treadwell withdrew. "Entry of the trump card. The mysterious Monsieur X," Anthony said. "Who is he? Can anyone guess?"
"Well," said Isaacstein, With your mysterious hints this morning, I should say that you've managed somehow or other to get hold of Prince Nicholas of Herzoslovakia.
No, you're wrong. Anthony's ears had caught the sound of footsteps in the hall. He crossed swiftly to the door and flung it open. A man stood on the threshold. A man with a neat black beard, eyeglasses, and a foppish appearance, somewhat marred by a bandage round the head. "Allow me to present to you the real Monsieur Lemoine of the Sûreté." There was a rush and a scuffle, and then the nasal tones of Mr. Hiram Fish from the window. "No! You don't escape this way, sonny. You'll observe I have you covered with this gun of mine. I came over to get you, and now I've got you."
"I think you owe us an explanation, Mr. Cade,"
said Isaac Stein, later in the evening. "There's nothing much to explain," said Anthony. "As soon as Fish and I discovered the stranger imprisoned in Dover, we knew where we were. The same idea again, you see. Real man kidnapped, false one, in this case Victor himself, takes his place. But it seems Battle here always thought there was something fishy about him and wired to Paris for his fingerprints."
"Ah!" cried the Baron. "Fingerprints that scoundrel talked about."
"It was a clever idea," Anthony agreed. Once I'd given Lemoine the tip about where the jewel was, he was keen to pass on the news to his accomplice, and, at the same time, to keep us all in that room. The note, of course, was really to Mademoiselle Brunn, and he told Treadwell to deliver it at once, which Treadwell did to the schoolroom upstairs. By accusing me of being King Victor, Lemoine created a diversion and prevented anyone from leaving the room.
"I must say, Cade," said George pompously, "that I consider your action foolhardy. If the slightest hitch had occurred in your plans, one of our national possessions might have disappeared beyond the hope of recovery."
"I guess you haven't tumbled, Mr. Lomax," said Fish. "That diamond was never in the library."
"Never?"
"No," said Anthony. "That little device of Count Stilptich's stood, for what it had originally stood for, a rose. When that dawned upon me on Monday, I went to the rose garden, to discover Mr. Fish had already tumbled to the same idea. If standing with your back to the sundial you take 7 paces forward, then 8 left and 3 right, you come to a bright red rose called Richmond. I suggest a little digging party tomorrow morning."
"Then the story about the books in the library—"
"An invention of mine, to trap the lady. Mr. Fish kept watch on the terrace and whistled when the appropriate moment arrived."
"Well, well," said Lord Caterham cheerfully. "Everything seems to have been cleared up most satisfactorily." "Except for one thing," said Isaac Stein. "What did you get me down here for?"
"Why did you come down originally?" said Anthony.
"To negotiate a loan."
"Exactly. But Prince Michael is dead. Are you prepared to offer the same loan, on the same terms, to his cousin Nicholas?"
"I thought he was killed in the Congo."
"Oh, he was killed, all right. I killed him. But no, I'm not a murderer. I mean that I spread the report of his death. But since I promised you a prince, Mr. Isaac Stein, will I do?"
"You?"
"Yes. I am Nicholas Sergius Alexander Ferdinand Obolovitch."
"Have a care, sir, what you say,"
spluttered little Captain Andrassy. "I can give you proofs," said Anthony quietly. "I think I shall be able to convince the Baron here."
"Your proofs I will examine, yes," said the Baron. "But of them for me there is no need. Your English mother you much resemble."
"Amazing," muttered George.
"Most amazing."
"My dear Mr. Lomax," said Anthony, "I suggest we adjourn now, and that we discuss the terms of the proposed loan." The Baron clicked his heels together.
"It will be the proudest moment of my life, sir, when I see you king of Herzoslovakia."
"Oh, by the way, I forgot to tell you. I'm married, you know." Dismay overspread the Baron's countenance.
Merciful God!
He boomed dismally. And she's to play queen to my king, Anthony continued. She's fully qualified, the daughter of an English peer who dates back to the Conquest, and she knows Herzoslovakia. My God, cried Lomax. Not Virginia Revel? Yes. My dear fellow, cried Lord Caterham, I congratulate you. Delightful creature.
You'll excuse my asking, Your Highness, said Isaac Stein, but when did this marriage take place?
Anthony smiled. As a matter of fact, this morning. And now, if you'll go on, gentlemen, I'll follow you in a minute. He waited while they filed out, then turned to Battle. Well, Battle, want to ask me something?
I do, sir. I take it the dead lady was the late Queen Viraga?
Quite right, Battle. But it'll be hushed up.
I'm also curious to know what made you drop your own name, if I'm not taking a liberty.
Not a bit. My mother was English. I'd been educated in England, and was far more interested in England than in Herzoslovakia. I felt an absolute fool knocking about the world with a comic opera title tacked onto me. You see, when I was young, I had democratic ideas, believed in the equality of all men. I especially disbelieved in kings and princes.
And since then?
Oh, since then, I've travelled the world. There's damn little equality going about.
If you'll allow me to say so, sir, I'm sure you'll make a very fine king out there.
Thank you, Battle. The superintendent coughed.
That man of yours is waiting outside the window.
Boris! So he is. It's a mercy that pistol went off and killed the lady. Otherwise he'd have wrung her neck, and you'd have wanted to hang him. His attachment to the Abolovitch dynasty is remarkable. As soon as Michael was dead, he attached himself to me, yet he couldn't possibly have known who I really was.
Instinct, said Battle. Like a dog.
Very awkward at the time, Anthony said. Oh, well, I'd better see what he wants. He went out through the window.
Master!
Boris pointed along the terrace. It was moonlight, and on a seat sat two figures, who rose to meet him as he strode forward. One was Virginia, the other... By all that's wonderful! Jimmy McGrath! Anthony cried. How did you get here? That trip of mine into the interior went phut, and some shady characters came monkeying around, wanting that manuscript. I near as nothing got a knife in the back one night. So I thought maybe you might need help, and I came along by the next boat. Wasn't it splendid of him? Said Virginia. Why didn't you tell me how frightfully nice he was? A perfect knight-errant. He told me all about the letters.
If I'd have known what you were like, I'd have brought them to you myself,
said Jimmy gallantly. Say, is the fun really over? Nothing for me to do? By Jove, said Anthony, there is. Wait a minute. He disappeared into the house and returned with a paper package. Go to the garage, help yourself to a car, beat it to London, and deliver that parcel to 17 Everdene Square before midnight. It's Mr. Balderson's private address, and in exchange he'll hand you £1,000. What? I understood the memoirs had been burnt. You don't think I'd fall for a story like that, do you? I rang up the publishers, found out the other was a fake call, and made up a dummy package. The real memoirs have never been out of my possession. Oh, Anthony, Virginia cried. You're not going to let them be published? You needn't worry. I've had time to wade through them, and as a writer, Stilptich is an insufferable bore. He doesn't go in for racy and indiscreet anecdotes. He only proses on about statecraft. Right. Well, I'm off, said Jimmy. I like the idea of that £1,000. Half a second. I've got a confession to make. Something everyone else knows, but that I haven't yet told you both. I've deceived you as to my real name. Oh, is it very dreadful? Said Virginia. It isn't something silly like Pobbles, is it? No. I'm really Prince Nicholas Obolovitch of Herzoslovakia. Oh, Anthony, How perfectly screaming. And I've married you. What are we going to do?
We'll go to Herzoslovakia and pretend to be king and queen. I hope you don't mind.
Mind? Virginia cried. I shall love it. We'll have a lot of fun, teaching the brigands not to be brigands and the assassins not to assassinate. And you'll enjoy being king. It's in your blood. You were brought up to the trade of royalty, like plumbers have a bent for plumbing.
Isn't she great? Murmured Jimmy. Then, discreetly, he faded into the night. Virginia, Anthony said, do you remember my telling you once that I'd have a damn good try to make you care for me?
I remember, said Virginia softly. But Superintendent Battle was looking out of the window.
Well, he isn't now.
Anthony caught her suddenly to him, kissing her eyelids, her lips, her hair. I do love you so, Virginia, he whispered. I shall love you until I die. Do you love me? Her head rested against his shoulder, and in a very low voice she answered, Not a bit.